Wi-Fi. I guess I know to call it to order. All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Bria. I am the chair of the Bylaws Committee. I'm calling this bylaw meeting to order on Monday, September 22nd at 6:35 p.m. Angel, if you could please move the roll.
So, committee members, when I call your name, please answer present. Jose Alto Morano. Adem Briha.
Present.
Bill Jones.
Present.
Sage Mason.
Present.
Jessica Morris.
Here.
Valerie Ponte. Asher Rodriguez. We have one.
Thank you. Could you bring up the ground rules screen? All right, before we move further, I'm just going to go over some ground rules for tonight's meeting. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. To raise your hand through Zoom, click the participant's icon and you will find the raise hand function there. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. Please keep your questions and comments brief and on topic to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. The minutes, I did them. I think I forgot to tell you that I did them.
Okay.
So what should we do on those?
Let's just skip it this one.
Okay, because they are done. All right. So then we'll just go to the adoption of the agenda for this evening. If I don't see any objections, then we will adopt this evening's agenda. Seeing no
Question. Including the, it's on there. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, then.
Are you talking about this?
No objection.
Okay, then we have adopted tonight's agenda. As I just mentioned, the minutes have been done, but I forgot to tell Angel, so I'll allow him the chance to review them, and then we'll approve them at next month's meeting. And then announcements and informational updates, unless anyone else has some. I don't. Okay, if you remember one later, you can say it then. We'll now move into presentations and discussions. All right, discussion on the goals for 2025, 2026 meeting session. Sage, we'll put you as your presentation under B, item 1, establishing a board oversight committee.
Okay.
I'll give you the floor there. All right, I guess I'll go first and we go on and say we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. I feel like for the most part, and feel free to disagree, we've addressed the major or most of the issues with the elections for now, with the term limits now in effect. Obviously, we can always go back and revisit them. You know, there might be a desire in the future to change the elections to be in the spring and all that. But I think for this election season, we have things in a good place. My other goals, personally, I think, I really think, to be honest with you, the bylaws aren't that much of a problem. It's been the enforcement of them. I do think there are some portions that are wordier than they need to be, and we could work on the language. I know it's your goal, but I'm definitely open to hearing about a board oversight committee and what it could do, and then attendance. You know, we have to find a way to strike a balance. I think, without getting into any details of the hearings, it's not so easy because I feel like not every hearing is the same. Not everybody's past attendance record is the same. So there has to be a way where we can kind of address them on a case-by-case basis, but then have parameters around those and parameters that we will not have trouble following, which seems to be the case. And then maybe something we'll talk about tonight are excused absences. I feel like that term has caused a lot of confusion and issues. And so that's it for me. And I guess we'll work to our right. So Jewel, I don't know if you'd like to share anything. You don't have to at this moment, but thank you. Nilsa, you could share.
I'm sharing.
Not sharing yet? Okay.
No, because, well, first of all, I want to tell you all how impressed I am with the work that you're doing and how you got the elections stuff pretty much settled. And so hopefully that we're going in the direction, you have an elections chair, who's going to be where that is. And Sage has been around for six presentations. I didn't see everything, so that's not the catch up.
Thank you. See?
My goals are to create, structure for this board oversight committee, and have us approve amendments that effectuate it, and then for the full board to also approve that for the office oversight committee to approve the idea as well.
Okay, thank you. Jessica?
Thanks for the opportunity to put forward goals related to this committee. I didn't have one when I approached the table because I didn't know it was on the agenda, but I did want to recognize that in our recess, the committee leadership has changed effectively, and with sort of an upcoming period of transition, I would like for this committee to remain potentially active going forward. So however that can be set up procedurally so that bylaws can continue to be something that is discussed, I would hope that we can meet that goal so that the sort of down demand as it goes doesn't in any way sort of jeopardize the sort of future ability of the committee to function.
I'll piggyback because I agree with you. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I had a co-chair and now I don't.
That's what I'm getting at.
Right,
Plain
okay.
English,
And
thank you.
not only did I like having a co-chair, I really like my co-chair. That's not to say that I don't like everybody, but I found it very easy for us to work together. But I'm not opposed to one. I think maybe I was put on because I've been on the board a long time, and we were in a quote unquote period of where things had to be done quickly. But I'm like totally okay with not being the chair of this anymore. I mean, I'm happy to do it. Or I'd be happy for me to get another co-chair.
Or establish a vice chair
Yeah.
in the event that.
Honestly,
things
if
happen.
I'm being honest with you, I like the co-chair thing also just because it's an extra committee. Unless they're gonna find people that aren't chairing any other committees, and that's obviously an option as well. But I think right now, I guess that's Xavier's call, as the chair of the board on what he decides to do. But I believe that I will actually advocate that at the very least the vice chair, but possibly another co-chair. All right, Angel? No? Okay. Just like to recognize that. All right, presentations and discussions. We're done with that. Discussion proposed amendments. Number one, establishing a board oversight committee. Rather than this be a discussion at first, let's make it a presentation. So Sage, go ahead, and then we'll have a discussion after.
Sure. Well, as we were just discussing, like the potential for the bylaws to be continually reviewed, one proposal, I think a lot of like our goals would kind of be addressed by how I sort of envision the board oversight committee, including, a responsibility of continually reviewing the bylaws and addressing them as necessary. I'd say the idea of the board oversight committee and having that be like an adjustment of what the office oversight committee currently does would help just make things more fluid. And I kind of started this process with 6 main objectives. And that was the training and onboarding of new members. Angel, do you think we could pull this up?
I was thinking maybe you could do it from here,
Okay, yeah.
because we know where everything
Is this gonna like mess up if I pull it too hard?
No. That's fine.
I'm making the resolution.
Okay. It says I'm sharing. Okay. And can I get rid of this thing at the top so it's not at the top? Okay, you can't see it there.
Well,
I want to move this so it's somewhere else.
You mean the cameras, like the images of people?
Okay, I'm good. So first, let me go to my resolution. So the scope of what the board oversight committee would do would be listed here, and this is a resolution, a draft resolution I've prepared for the office oversight committee to kind of like accept what it would be transitioning into. And so in addition to the first name change, the other things would be training or onboarding new members, continuing trainings for existing members as needed. It would also adjudicate board member staff grievances and complaints, would handle disciplinary or attendance proceedings, and enforce compliance with the bylaws. That's sort of the biggest thing. So the board oversight committee would be empowered to, if you didn't follow the bylaws, it would, you would, if somebody wanted to complain, or the board oversight committee can do it on its own accord, can investigate, conduct a due process hearing, and then come up with appropriate, consequences. They would probably not be like that severe, like removing
At
from
least
the
in the
board.
beginning.
Yeah, but it would be maybe like a censure, or like you do not have the floor for one full board meeting or one committee meeting because you didn't follow the bylaws. Like just a way of making sure that people do what they're supposed to.
Consequences.
Yeah, holding people accountable. And then the last thing is related to what office oversight already does, but have a say in the hiring of the board. And many of these things I've spoken to Nilsa about. And so I think it'd be great for the office oversight committee to take this in. It gets more detailed in the actual bylaws revisions, which I'll get into in a second. And I think we talked about at our last bylaws committee meeting, that ideally the bylaws themselves would not change drastically. And so my revisions to the actual bylaws are relatively small, but the internal working document, which will be circulated, and made known to everybody on the board, that governs the board oversight committee, would be pretty detailed on like how disciplinary hearings take place, who is responsible for some of these trainings, what role the board oversight committee would have in the actual hiring, and as detailed as like what are the punishments, and correlated to what actions, what are the possibilities, and go on straight from there. So this is like the general resolution. This is the document that would begin to articulate what some of those responsibilities would be. And I've broken it down into 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5 or 6 articles. So board office hiring, and that would ultimately, so I'll start at the top for organization's sake. Board member training and continuing education and experience. So the onboarding of new members, I think Angel already does a great job, but that's not something that Angel has to be responsible for. So I think it'd be great if we instill the culture of the board oversight committee, laying the foundation for oncoming board members, figure out exactly what is your role, what powers do you have, what should you be doing, because I think there are a lot of times now where we just kind of throw board members into the deep end, and it's you'll figure it out. And a lot of board members just need a little bit more guidance in figuring things out. To this day, I would say almost everybody who's not a committee chair or on the district needs and budget committee doesn't really know what's going on with our statement of district needs and budget. Probably doesn't have a very good grasp of parliamentary procedure. And these are all things that we could just train members on. And that over the course of time, maybe it's not going to happen the first year or the second year, but 3 years down the line, when we've really perfected this process of onboarding, what trainings are necessary, what really do people need to know to be like an effective board member, I think the entire community board would suddenly be like a more powerful institution. That's really the ultimate goal here, is for the community board to improve, to be better. And that's what the oversight committee is finding ways to do. So in addition to the new members, we'd also train existing veteran members on things like parliamentary procedure, effective like budget request drafting, effective district needs narrative drafting. That's something we're going through right now. Effective outreach to city agencies. There are a lot of people who just like don't know like who do you email, how do you send an email, like what do you do when like how do you do that? So telling people like what can you do and what should you be doing. Drafting resolutions. A lot of people just like let like the chair of the committee do that. Like I want a resolution and they don't know like what happens next. Motion drafting and then clarification on like the roles of board members and roles of staff. Like how do you treat the staff? What should you expect staff to be doing? What is actually your job to be doing and not the staff's job? Yeah, and then also I think really important, and this is like an idea that we also gave me, is just like feedback. So my goal would be for the board oversight committee that we receive like an annual survey of all board members. That's like, how do you think things are going? What trainings do you want, need? What are your goals for this upcoming year? Because a lot of times in the actual committee meeting, people are just afraid or forget what they were talking about or thinking of. But this gives people an opportunity to really like, I don't know if it will be anonymous or not. That is up to how what the feedback is on that. And I think maybe depending, I have to check if it's allowed to be anonymous because we're all subject to like open meetings and FOIL stuff. But I think it'd be great for board members to be able to like have an outlet that's not like, if it's not a complaint or a grievance, but just like, I wish we did more of this. For the board oversight committee to take that feedback and try and figure out ways to implement it, maybe as part of the trainings or just like overall, like the experience of the.
Or recommendations to chairs.
Exactly. Yeah. Great. Then there's the adjudication and mediation of community board operational issues. This, I tried to be specific about distinguishing like board business, like what each committee has on its agenda every month, versus like internal stuff. Because I think what Jose was sort of commenting on the Google Drive a couple of months ago was his view of like really a fundamental disagreement about what should be the executive committee's job and what should be the board oversight committee's job. My goal is for the board oversight committee just to deal with like procedure and function, not like what is each committee like doing.
Right.
And so like board business, that's the committee, and that's what executive committee will decide, like what's on the agenda for each committee. But things like that wouldn't be subject to like a committee meeting, and that executive committee doesn't want to spend like time at its meetings talking about, would or could be the province of the board oversight committee. And that would include like, so-and-so didn't follow the rules at this last meeting. Though maybe that would happen in an executive session. Navigating, okay, so this is kind of the next thing. But like the interpretation of the bylaws. My view is that the board oversight committee would be in the best position to like review the bylaws because it would be the body that any issues with the bylaws could go to. If you have like a complaint or a grievance, board oversight committee is already there. Could talk about how should the bylaws be interpreted in this instance, or do we need to make a change to the bylaws because the bylaws are like the constitution of the board. And the board oversight committee's purpose is to make the functioning and like the constitution of the board more responsive to what the board needs to be doing in order to do its work effectively. So there's that. And so here and all of this needs to be like better worded, but this is like the bones of
Outline,
it.
yeah.
So it would, from time to time, review the bylaws, and that would just be like something it normally does. Community Board 11 due process procedures. This is where we would get into like the strikes, like who do you go to, how does absence accountability work. And for this, so far, I just copied like what is already the due process procedures, but it would just be shifted from it being executive committee's job, which like now I'm on executive committee and I was at an executive committee meeting the other day. And I was like we spent almost 2 hours doing like other stuff. And then it's like, oh, you need like an hour for the attendance hearing. And it was like, I really wish the meeting could have ended already.
It's like a full board meeting.
Yeah, especially when there are members of executive who have attendance things, and then it just kind of gets awkward. No, I understand that's not something that would necessarily be resolved by.
No, but I agree with you. It was awkward.
Yeah, but it could also still be awkward.
Of course,
for the board
yeah.
oversight
As
steering.
people, yeah.
But an idea would be for the board oversight committee to be like the initial forum where that goes, and then for maybe that committee, depending on the circumstances, to decide that a third party, and have that be sort of a default, unless there's some circumstance that a third party would adjudicate that, and then a non-interested party could be involved in deciding whether somebody who is a great person and has made valuable contributions but doesn't show up to anything and causes forum problems, if they should continue being a board member, or if it's in their best interest or in the board's best interest for them to change their role. So right now I've just gone through the what is already the due process procedures and just changed everything to be instead of executive goes to board oversight committee. And that's also the main change I made to the actual bylaws in places where it's relevant, but this is that. And then board office hiring. Nilsa and I talked about an instance where somebody who was being hired basically had to go before the full board, and they thought they had the job already and it sort of gone through, and I wasn't here, so I don't know the details. But they show up for the full board meeting, and then at full board they are not approved, and for whatever happened in full board, maybe this person was talking and they said something, but they showed up and then they weren't hired, and it was embarrassing and a weird use of time for this person who thought they had a job, and now for them to just kind of be out there. And so the goal here was to kind of clarify that and make it so it's really the board oversight's responsibility to do hiring stuff. This gets into the city charter, which details the process through which or the power of community boards to hire a district manager, but doesn't really get into what happens below that for additional staff. And so this would kind of say and the goal here is for the district manager and the chair to kind of run things, but for the board oversight committee to consult and for them to be the forum that votes on that, just for the full board to ratify.
Nilsa has a question.
Right, so when we were talking, and I shared this stuff, and I like the idea that you have, but there's only one change that I would like to see. I would like to see, because the board hires the district manager should be able to hire his staff, the people that come to meet. Now, once the district manager decides on a candidate or two candidates that he's really favorable for, then I would then think that, as he always has or has happened, where he would then share those candidates. But because the office work is so intricate and you have to the district manager has to be in charge and put together those moving pieces. I like the idea that the district manager takes the lead on that, and then the office oversight, board oversight, supports his choice, so that then he will move it forward, then that committee could move it forward with the board. On the consultation with the district manager and the chair, this is the candidate that we're looking to hire, and then that's it, as opposed to then having too many voices, dilute the process, which has happened to us sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's like the only change that I would make. I think that the board carries the district manager because the district manager works with the chair, so that makes sense. But I think anybody else in the office, the district manager should take the lead on it. And it should be his decision with the board oversight support.
All right, yeah, so district manager basically says, I want to hire so-and-so, tells the board oversight, and then unless the board oversight committee finds some totally, something that the district manager missed,
Right.
they would generally just support, I mean,
Right, and the district manager, of course, as he always does, or anybody would share the resume and stuff like that, so that, we would know. And basically, like what we do now is where the board has been moving towards accepting the committee's recommendations, and so now they actually say, we accept the committee recommendations, so it's almost like the board oversight would accept the district manager's recommendation, because who knows better than he, who he or he needs to work with, he or she needs to work with, and what he's looking for, and what may open up in the future. That's like the only pattern.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I want to do that. Is that just like right now, would the process be significantly different? I mean, it sounds like you, maybe saying don't go to the full board.
No. So the way the process has been now is when we have, and Angel, please correct me if I'm wrong, because Angel does this process, but as far as I remember it, a posting is put where a job opening is and resumes are collected. Angel, if I remember correctly, calls through all of them and sees who fits the categories of that. And if, let's say, 100 resumes, then he comes down maybe to 10. And then from there, he circulates that to a panel, which has been the chair, the vice chair, and I forget who, to help review those, and then interviews are set up. And then based on those interviews is where you may have a secondary interview and then the decision. And so there's always been that component where the district manager there's always been input with the district manager. And I'm not trying to change that, but what I'm saying is who better than the district manager knows what he needs, right? And knows the office dynamics and what we should be looking for. So it makes sense to me that the district manager takes the lead, goes through those applications. If, there may be the place to still do that process, but ultimately, the district manager's opinion takes the lead as opposed to 4 or 5 people sitting at the table coming up and saying, well, I think you should work with this person, or this person sounds good, but in the district manager's mind, knowing what is needed, he might have another candidate. So while it may stay the same, the district manager is the driver. And if he says, these are my top 2, and this one is my first preference, that the board oversight reviews that, goes by his recommendation, and in the past they make an offer and if it fits, then it's good. And then if it doesn't, we come to our second candidate, and sometimes we wait. And you just smile.
so essentially,
The district manager is the driver of the hiring.
so essentially, he could kind of inform us of his process, but he's gonna come to the board oversight committee with that one person when he's done with that whole process and be like,
Who he wants
right.
to be.
So, okay.
And then we support him in his decision. And I always think that's great, because if it's not a good decision, I blame him, but not,
No, I
But
agree.
it should be him. I mean, he's in charge of the office. He's in charge of working with people. He's the one that has to set up relationships and do overseeing of people's tasks. So why not he be the person who hires who he wants and we ratify it as opposed to us muddying the waters?
And forgive me for not memorizing this whole bylaw document, but do the bylaws outline how we currently hire staff other than the district manager? Or is this like a practice that we'd have to implement more than a bylaw change?
I don't know if it specifies the process per se, or it mentions, about hiring, let's say, and then the process that has developed, or something that internally was developed for.
Well, I like your idea. I mean, there's nothing to really, I guess, enforce it and not have, people push back or whatever.
Yeah, this
We
is
could
the office
put it
that-
in, but we could put it in, like, just very briefly, we could consider that to essentially, I think we could put in a few lines what you just said, hiring process, and, essentially, district manager presents one, their final applicant to the board, essentially hires them.
Hires the office staff.
Yeah,
And,
but still needs the board approval, yeah, okay, yeah, that's, all right,
do we need the board approval for the hiring? Yes.
Um,
I know we need it for the district manager, and I know it has been the practice where we then.
well, Angel, let me ask you, and please answer. Right now, if we just said we're okay with you hiring your staff, do we even have to vote on that? That's, I guess, my question.
Yeah, all hiring.
Has to be voted
are subject to a vote by the board.
Okay,
So we still have to do that, but we would.
we can craft it, we just have to craft it to ultimately give him the power
Yeah,
to
it
do
says
that.
the power, and then he lets us know, and then we
Yeah,
can get it to the
okay.
board.
All right,
So that sounds like a plan, which
Okay.
is basically along the lines of you just.
Yeah, so I think that's great. And so one thing in my mind is like maybe like 100 years from now when Angel's not, the district manager anymore, what if there's like a district manager who is like less good and like just wants to kind of unilaterally have their person?
Well, that's why the district manager within that person in front of the board oversight. So don't forget, the board oversight still has to support that decision. And don't forget that just as the board has the power to hire,
we can fire.
the board has the power to fire for cause.
Like, Angel can't appoint Angel wouldn't be appointing his successor, right? So like if he were to ever leave, which probably won't happen, he would just present, or and then we'd make that decision on the new district manager. So if we choose badly, that's on us, but there's remedies to fix that too. So, yeah, but I understand that was a good point to clarify, I think.
So yeah, I think it sounds like the main thing is that Angel would present like one.
Right.
This final candidate.
And like, if you had, like, let's be honest here, like, if Angel somehow,
And I don't love that we're using Angel.
all right, let's use district manager. Let's say the district manager had a snafu and totally missed some background thing on someone and someone found out. I mean, then, you're of a committee, you can interject. But I think generally speaking, it's like, here's who I want to work with. And okay, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I've always felt that they're working in tandem more than 40 hours a week. And we're all volunteering. Some of us are more involved than others, but no one is involved in that relationship as they are with each other. And I actually think it benefits the board that, that person is working with who they think they want to work with. And then at the same time, we hold them accountable for those decisions as well, right? If it's not working out well, then there's a discussion to be had, right?
And if you think about it this way, well, if you bring someone to the table, nothing says that we can't ask that person questions, right? Like we've done in the past with multiple candidates and say, well, how do you think you fit in this and that? And then that helps support that, that motion that we will make to bring his hiring for the board. And then it will also lessen the more thorough that we are with the candidate, the final candidate, then it will lessen sometimes what happens at the board where because they're not aware, or they don't want to take the time, it just becomes like, almost like time consuming. Whereas the board may be open to saying, well, this is a candidate, the resume matches, the board oversight did their due diligence and they made a recommendation and they will support it.
I think the best way to proceed with this is look at the language that's in there, replace it with language essentially that was like that. I think the best person to do that I'll do it like in tandem with him, but obviously it's his thing. And then the way we kind of have these presented here, maybe at next month's meeting, that's what's being proposed. So I think that's.
I will say right now, there's nothing in the bylaws about hiring. Though there is one piece that is, I'm kind of, how do I screen? I'll just read it from my screen. That says like the role of the district manager, that's Article 7 of the bylaws. And the last thing says the district manager shall monitor and evaluate delivery, yada, yada, yada. Shall chair the district, yada, supervise all staff, persons hired by the board, administer the board office. And then I added as an amendment proposal for this, in conjunction with the board oversight committee. So it doesn't say like, it says supervise all staff persons hired by the board. It doesn't say like how does somebody become hired by the board.
Right.
And so my amendment would probably be in there, and I would give a place to include.
That sounds good.
Yeah, like maybe even a separate section because that doesn't really have to do, or maybe like present a preferred candidate for approval to the board oversight committee for any hiring decisions to be ratified by the full board.
Sounds fair to me.
So Sage,
Okay, Jessica then Angel.
Angel might be on the same page, literally.
Is there something in there?
There is very much something that I believe addresses this and may be transferable and for the gap that we're discussing within Article 7, District Manager, current proposed. It's in the recommendation. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, okay. So thanks, Jessica. So I didn't know you had this in your proposal stage, so I was waiting to the end for my bit. So I submitted some ideas to them via email. He asked me to prepare them as proposals to present to you guys this evening. And the one that's relevant to what we were just talking about in terms of hiring is, like Jessica was saying, Article 7 on the district manager. So I'm proposing, in addition, under A, that explains that the board, within its budgetary appropriations pursuant to the charter, shall employ a district manager, blah, 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 blah. Adding underneath that, the community board delegates to the district manager the authority for hiring additional board staff, professionals, planners, and consultants to be carried out within the board's budgetary appropriations and in accordance with other applicable laws and personnel policies of the city. In the absence of a district manager, the committee charged with oversight of the board office will serve this function. And I think that covers kind of everything that was being discussed. In terms of our current practice, or the practice that's been going on for a while, thank you, Melissa, for the pat on the back. I appreciate it. Been here for a while, gone through a few cycles of hiring. The last cycles, which resulted in Harley Wine, Marlene Gear, and then Khalid Nixon being hired, we used a different process. I wrote up a whole new hiring process with the agreement and support of the then oversight committee chair, and it worked really, really well. But it was, kind of mirroring what had happened before, which, as Nelson described, was this committee of board members that was, pulled together to, review applications and make selections and all that. So I'm just going to kind of just get to it. That process, in my opinion, got corrupted, and that's why I made the recommendations to the last oversight chair a few years ago. that resulted in the hiring of those 3 individuals that I mentioned. Unfortunately, in my observation, the committee seemed to have made it its objective to counter the recommendations being made by the district manager at the time. And my position, and I think the position of some members, because they're supposed to be in confidence about it, is what Nosa was saying. If someone is hired for the position of district manager, that means they're managing the office. In every management position, you're responsible as a manager for managing. You're not offloading that to someone else that you're managing, especially if you're in a position of hiring or playing a role in the hiring. If you're a junior manager or something, maybe you don't have as much of a role. But if you're the senior manager, which in this case the district manager is, then that responsibility typically is afforded to the person in that role. And as I was mentioned, then that person is accountable for the decisions that they make, the recommendations they make. They can't make, because we're city, this is a city or agency, the district manager alone can't make the final hiring, can't hire the person or fire the person, but can make those decisions. Then those have to be ratified by the full board of whatever body. Hiring, raises, all of it requires the sign off of the full board resulting from a vote, not any other committee. Now, if there wanted to be, the insertion at some point for whatever role of a body like SAGE is recommending, I think that can be fine, so long as, to my recommendation, so long as it is not interfering with the district manager's ability to fulfill that function. It's been my experience that sometimes, for whatever motivations, members of the body that were in the role of the oversight or whatever, kind of interceded in an unproductive way. I'm trying to say this as politely as I can. I'll revert back to the previous statement. I think they corrupted the process. And that made things in those instances more difficult than they needed to be, and frankly, not productive. And as demonstrated or exemplified by these 3 most recent hires and the original hire, in this case, it's me, but in other cases, like my predecessor, I believe also made very good hires, not just because he hired me, but the people before that, who I had the good fortune of meeting, were really good at their jobs. So I think that if you do a really good job in hiring the district manager, then you can hold that district manager to account for doing as good a job as they can in hiring the support staff and anybody else. And plus, it just makes it, I think, a much more efficient process. Like, the one last thing I'll say, which I think is kind of funny, in my initial interview 100,000 years ago for ADM, I was asked some questions that the chair at the time had to intercede in the middle of the hearing, in the middle of the interview, because the questions were so preposterous, So, maybe people that know what they're doing or can be more directly responsible, it makes more sense. So, I think there's a way to kind of marry those two. And the language that I read, I didn't make up whole cloth. Other district managers across the city have been having an ongoing set of conversations with the Office of Management and Budget and the Law Department as to this whole process. I was ignoring those emails for quite a while until they resolved. And then when they resolved, there was some guidance from the Law Department in terms of like suggested language, and that's where I pulled that from. Like, because they're lawyers, so they really couched it. I'm like, if you were to do something, it would require an action of the board, and you should word it something like this. So that's what I found.
My understanding of the role of what I think should be the role of the board oversight committee is not to corrupt or right? To really, you need a witness. Even when you're doing your job right, as best as you can, as for anybody, you still need a witness when you're dealing with any kind of processes that can't be fully transparent. And I think the role in that case of a committee that would have any involvement in the hiring process by a senior manager would be to kind of just confirm that the process was carried out in accordance with all of these requirements. It's nothing more than a sort of a corroborating witness in a process that should be led in its outcome by those who will be responsible for the work. And the ratification then by the board has that point of witness, right? The oversight. Not that it hasn't worked like that in the past recently. I think it has, but it's my understanding of kind of the role and why it would be necessary
Yeah.
or why it's a good practice.
So if I can, I appreciate that, but to the use, I don't throw words around willy-nilly. When I say corrupt, I mean it to have the impact. The process in the instances that I'm referring to, that I'm alluding to, were corrupted by the body. I understand the oversight part, like, Angel, you're doing your work, which was always the thing, like, here's my recommendations, here's everything. Nelson can attest.
Yeah.
All right? Because she was formerly the chair. That's not a problem. The district manager, operating in a bunker is not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that the district manager needs to be empowered with the full responsibility to the extent allowable to conduct that exercise. And with oversight, that's fine, just like we have now with the different officers that have oversight over operations of the office and operations of the board. The use of the word corruption is because the body itself was corrupted, not my process or it was the body was inserting corruption into it.
So I like your suggestions, Angel, and I want to incorporate them into this. But I also think about what Jess just said. So my view of like what this would look like would be maybe you do your whole thing as your that is what the district manager does. Part of what it means to like supervise the office is the hiring, but for the board oversight committee to be the the witness to be like, yeah, Angel picked this guy, we have no problems with that, to the full board to ratify, so that there's a degree of like this was somebody took a look at this, but maybe not necessarily have that committee like interview the person and bring them in and like question them with all these things.
I think that's fair.
Just to ask you like before we start paying this person and before they become a city employee.
But I gotta interject. I don't agree. I gotta be.
Well, let me finish.
All right, I haven't talked in like a half an hour.
Okay, if you'll allow me.
Yeah.
What was I about to say?
Go ahead, take it.
We forget that.
I'm actually gonna support you with what I'm saying. No, because I've had somebody say 10 minutes ago about different polling on it.
Damn it, what were you just saying? Say so, sorry.
For the you can do all the interviewing, but you present one person for the board oversight committee to be like, yeah, we Angel did a good job with this.
Competence.
Yeah, it's the board's decision, not just Angel's decision.
Yeah, and then that's fine.
And my fear is that the full board would become that obstruction that right now you're attributing to the former iteration of the body that also.
Yeah. No, so the checking of the work I think is fine. And then I think that and I want this to be clear, an acknowledgement of the responsibility of the district manager to be thorough in their job, right? If the district manager is kind of slacking and wants to hire, their cousin, then if the oversight committee or the body sees like, well, that's just dude's cousin, yes, or this person's resume doesn't, kind of match up to what our intended goal was with the hire. I think that's all fair. It's the interference with the process and the assumption of a lack of ability on the part of a manager that's been hired to fulfill this function to do that, to fill that function. Like, But I think we should be having this conversation as the district manager, but since I've been referenced multiple times, I'll insert, I've been managing for 25 years. I know how to do this. So the idea that I would, as a matter of fact, forget the 25, the 15 that I've been here, the 11 that I've been hiring, every hire that I've been personally directly responsible for has been excellent. Right? So if it's the next person that I hire to be questioned by people that aren't making these hires when I have a track record of hiring, kind of hard to swallow. Especially like, as was mentioned before, as a body of volunteers, many of which may be hiring in their personal lives, but many of which are not. And I would argue most of which aren't familiar with the intricacies of this particular office, just like any of us, no matter our experience, are not going to be familiar with all the intricacies of somebody else's office. So I think for that reason, there should be a lot of weight with the DM, and with that weight, a lot of expectation. Right, like the DM slacking, like you've been here 11 years, you did a good job, before, but now you just messed this up. That's fair, like you messed up, like I'm accountable, and whomever's in this role should also be accountable.
I mean, I think I'm going to work backwards. I think one of the ways to still check your work is that the board still has the power to fire somebody that Angel hires, right? So there's a mechanism in place where, if we see that he messed up, we can correct that. My concern is if we go with the board oversight committee, we have to be very careful on how we word that. Otherwise, I do feel like then this just runs the risk of being exactly the way it is. And to be honest with you, if it's as much as them just rubber stamping him, then why can't the board just be the witness of it at the full board meeting? If it's going to be if it's literally going to be, and I think what Nilsa you're saying is, Angel goes, that's the resume, that's who I want to hire. Then what is the board oversight witnessing?
Yeah, well, you shouldn't hire that person. If I do it that way,
No, what you would
then you
suggest,
shouldn't hire.
no.
Like I should defend the decision.
Right, at full.
Like right. So with following this example, just like testing it out.
But what's the difference? And I guess this is
So
a
I was
question.
going to try to get to it.
I think I have an
idea to respond.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think the first difference is there's no interview at the oversight committee. That's all left. If I heard say correctly, governmentally, and that's all left with the district manager. But then there's a step. The district manager selects. I want to hire Fulani John Doe, right? And comes and presents. Has to come and present to the oversight committee. I have. And I've done this before. We had 100 resumes and blah, 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 selected down, interviewed this many people. And this is my recommendation for this month. Then I go before that body. That body's going to ask me, as they've done in the past, well, why a Dem? I'm like, well, he has this history, whatever. In his interview, he said whatever I need to say, right? Whatever I'm finding that's impressed me, that I think is a match. And I've always done that. Like, that's always been the case. Like, even when it wasn't presenting, and not even when. In addition to presenting to office oversight, I've also presented it at full board and had cockamamie questions being asked, me at full board after months of going through the selection process. So I think it can work.
Okay, no, then we're all on board. I mean, so essentially what you're saying is you come with one candidate and then you pitch it to board oversight, who then makes the recommendations to full board.
It could be pressure to there, and if I didn't do a good job, like either come back to it or make another selection before.
I think that actually makes sense.
Wasting
Yeah,
full
that's a
board
good idea.
Another transparency is the interview, like the interview checklist, what he's done, why he gives this, he would already have created almost a file on this person, which he always has.
I was missing what the issue that you've been having is. Now that you've clarified that, then that makes complete sense in my opinion.
Right, because what's happened in the past, and I think as chair, I think I was better at doing this, was giving the officer time. And so it was important that the office runs as an office should. If you are working in your private industry and someone, instead of you interviewing and hiring someone available and your boss just hands you someone, that can make for not working as well as you could, where if I'm directly involved hiring my person, there's buy-in. And then I can better, the committees and everything like that that's gonna work with this person will come from a more positive place. Like, there's always been transparency in this office. There's always been conversations that they may not, things are not as transparent, and I will tell you that I've been here 15 years, and that's not so. If you look into our files, you will always find documentation that supports whatever. We've had, when multiple people have interviewed candidates, we've all taken notes, we've all gotten resumes, we've all had to hand in our interview notes in for compilation. And so, being as the district, we count on the district manager for so much. And for us not to allow him to have the final say, I mean, obviously the board has the final say, but in picking who he wants and then having that money by many different opinions of people who are volunteers who may be here one day and gone the next, or may not be looking at the reasons why this person is a good fit, right? They're seeing this, but not seeing what, let's say, the district manager is. And then that's where questions come in that don't do grace to the potential hiree, right? And then that's where we look kind of unprepared when we ask dumb questions. And we have asked dumb questions, and we've had processes that don't bear out. And it just seems like what you've proposed and written is great. And what Angel has added in, I think is like that finishing touch, almost trying to take away the board process. But the district manager, I will say this to you, that the district manager is the one that should be the person who proposes the hiring and actually hires that person and you know, well, not hires until they, you know, the board oversight sees that. But that should be 98% of the process. It shouldn't be 50.
All right, Jessica, and then I think we'll move to the next thing.
You know, one question just to sort of back up a little bit and zoom out. I think fundamentally, you know, Sage, thank you for your recognition of the need for the work that you've taken up with on behalf of the board. I think that is an incredible sort of understanding of what's missing and how to figure out how to fill it. I think if, you know, how the board oversight committee is comprised then also becomes a big question. But I would say back to our initial kind of the conversation that's on the table now, the board oversight, in my understanding, would serve two roles. First, they would receive Angel's case for, receive the district manager's case for candidate to put forward, ex-candidate, the candidate that has been vetted. They would also receive the information about that vetting process, whereby it would be backed up with data points and descriptors that can be verified, right? It is, you know, it's a case that's put forward,
And
whereby then not only the voice of the district manager coming to the full board saying this is who I want to hire, it is the board oversight office doing that, you know, and I think that is where there may be a misunderstanding. Clarification of what has been presented already at board oversight or the committee that existed in the past. I don't think that's any different necessarily than what has been put before the board in the past, other than it being somehow formalized as a standing committee that has this as part of its role, as part of its charge.
Well, I think, I mean, maybe I'm missing it. I think essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, Angel would do all the vetting, all the interviews, everything. Then he'd pick somebody, he'd assemble the package, so to speak.
it sounds like I didn't want to interrupt you, but just that point about like the process, it sounds like Angel already has like whatever that process was in the past that got um, corrupted, like that process is already written down somewhere. And so like what the materials are that are part of this packet already.
Yeah, it's not a bylaw. Yes.
Not a bylaw, but you know,
No,
could be
I
incorporated.
want to wrap this one up. This is what I think. You already put language down here in number 7. Now there's the question of how we tie that in, right, all together with the committee. Can you-
It shouldn't be that difficult.
No, I'm saying it's not.
Like the district manager finds his final recommendation, he presents everything, let's say this is the office oversight. He comes in and says, listen, for this open position, I've interviewed 10 people, I have my notes on all 9. This 10th person is really superlative, this is the person I want to go with, and for the reasons of this and this and that. We have the package, we review. If there's any questions, we would ask it to Angel as opposed to the interviewee, because we assume that Angel has done a better job. Now, if something doesn't get answered, then we can always ask Angel to go back and get us that. And then we make a recommendation that we support, you know, as presented by the district manager, we support the hiring or the moving forward for an offer to this person, you know, and then, you know, Angel has all that, you know, he has all his, and that's it. Because that's basically what we've done, but we've had other people like involved, and then it's always come down to like, almost like sometimes negotiation. You know, when I was chair, we always tried to, even though we interviewed several different people, the district manager's opinion was needed because he's the one that works. We all go our separate ways, and the district manager applies it. And so if that's the case, and he's the manager, and I've been managing for too long to say, then the manager should have that responsibility. And so I agree with what you're saying as well.
I think we just really simplifies. Angel, the way you wrote this, right? I'm gonna delegate it if anybody has a problem, but I really don't want to talk about this anymore. Angel, the same way you wrote this, can you just like incorporate that part? And it really doesn't matter at the moment whether, okay. So you do
I'm
it,
just gonna take what
yeah.
Angel did, and I'm gonna make it gel with
right.
this and do difference, lots, what you did, amazing.
Well,
Just to
keep,
clarify,
okay, can I just finish my thought
the
first?
yes,
Okay. Or you want to go ahead, because I was talking, but, okay.
the language that's here
No, it's
is
fine.
the language that you referred to as having been passed back and forth amongst other district managers and approved in city law guidance, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is a standalone item. It's always been a standalone item. I don't understand why it's so complicated to take this as you wrote it and implement what we talked about. I'm gonna go way out right now. I'm completely supportive of everything you've said about a board oversight committee. I would support that idea. Obviously, I'm just gonna get the point. This doesn't matter though. Whether it says office oversight or board oversight, this can be carried out the way we've spoken about it. Am I wrong? So then craft it with that language and then just share it with all of us. And I'd like to vote on this next month. We've already, okay, now Angel, yeah. No, I mean, I'm trying to,
I'm waiting, I'm just trying to raise.
no, go ahead.
Okay. So
I'm sorry.
So I'm glad that we talked about it and such stuff, because I think we kind of started off agreeing and then just kind of, improved and melded, and I think we ended up agreeing, which is great. One thing that, I'll be frank, as a non-board member, is a frustration for a non-board member is, and this is partly because y'all don't know. The frustration is that I wish that y'all would assume that all these I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Sometimes, not this group, but you as a representative of the larger body, there seems to be an assumption based on ignorance, but you don't know, you didn't see it, that there aren't things in place. There certainly are things in place. Nilsa knows because I presented it to him. It's like a 30-page document on how we hire, right? I'm happy to share that with you. And if this goes through in this form or it's another form, then I can probably save 25 of those pages. which is also good, easier to digest. But I just wanted to, stating that, a little bit of frustration, reassure you that not only am I not operating in a vacuum or in a cave somewhere, I'm very thorough with the things that I do, and I'm very transparent in the things that I do. Are members 40 through 50 caring when I send some document up? Nope. Doesn't mean I haven't sent them out. I have. It just kind of landed on deaf ears. But yeah, it's all covered, and you don't have to assume that I did it. But please don't assume that I haven't. I definitely have. I'm like too careful before I do anything. Not too careful,
I think
but
that's
very
great.
careful.
We love you, Angel. You're the best.
I'm not the best, but thank you.
And so one thing I want to mention, and Jessica just mentioned this as well, I love that you're very supportive of everything. I want to get everybody's input. I think one of the most important issues that we haven't really talked about is who is on the board oversight.
Oh, I didn't think you were done.
Okay.
I was saying, I meant in what you've said so far,
Mhm.
but we kind of went way off, well, not off the rails, like, we're circling back to let you finish before, and then you can address that. So I think just before we do that, craft it, what we talked about, share it with Angel first, so that you two have an agreement on what you want to email the rest of the committee, and then give us at least just a week to review it, have it a week before the next meeting, which I will give you ample time to know what that date is. And then I believe that, I can't imagine us having a problem supporting that, but that's the homework. I can't tell you what the outcome will be. Jessica?
Something that I commented on in Sage's thorough documentation, which I really appreciate, was also sort of outlined the process. Once you invoke the words adjudicate, handle disciplinary, and enforce compliance, I suggested that we get the perspective of subject matter experts who also serve on this committee with regard to some of those things. Julian, specifically sort of looking to you for any, it concerns me in that we are charging a body with doing those things that are actually, how do they do those things? What points of support do they have? Where, and I don't know if that's getting into it too much, or if there are kind of practical examples from other boards or recommendations from a borough president or other bodies, if there is a committee being formed to be a first kind of measure of taking these things on that have been kind of called out and identified as also gaps often in support for community board operations citywide. So flags, when we use words like adjudicate, enforce, comply, mostly adjudicate is the biggest.
I have a suggestion, a quick one. I think you mentioned the composition. I have two quick suggestions that, besides saying like thank you for all this work, I think it makes a lot of sense to add the board oversight stuff, the office oversight stuff, the way that you presented it. Two suggestions is that the treasurer and the secretary be on this body and not on the executive. I like that idea.
Wow.
I mean, let me say this, we don't have to vote every amendment all at once that you present, right? Like, you can expand on this. So if we're essentially starting with, we're gonna remove office oversight and replace it with board oversight. Is office oversight, what are the three standing committees? Land use, budget, district needs?
Executive, budget, and land use.
All right, so in order, I think, and I said this to you, but I could be wrong, in order to put amendments in the bylaws that would specifically pertain to one committee, that, in my opinion, that committee would have to become a standing committee. I don't see how you could have things that govern it in the bylaws, but then not have it be a standing committee. And if we're calling it, whatever we're calling it, we're gonna have to remove, I think it's, what did you call them, special committees that are mentioned in the bylaws, and office oversight is one of those in the bylaws, right? As a
Yes, you can just move it without removing the rest.
Yeah,
Right, well, that's what I mean.
It would just be an amendment.
Right, essentially remove that as a special committee, put board oversight in as a standing committee, and then let's just say we're not ready to move forward on anything else right off the bat, then board oversight's essentially just gonna do what office oversight does, and, because I agree with Jessica, and even if there weren't specific words that were concerning, that it would be a lot to just take all of this and vote it in one fell swoop. So I think it could be done in a process. That's just my thinking, but go ahead, Jessica.
For clarification, to Sage's point earlier, that this committee would kind of become that committee. You're suggesting that,
Well, is it, or did you say enforce what this committee does? That's what I thought you said.
My interpretation of what this committee is a temporary committee that was created for the specific purpose of figuring out what the, not elections necessarily, though we did do that.
That was the major urgency in calling this, I believe.
Yeah, maybe.
But-
sorry, to clarify my question and not open a can of worms, my clarification was that process again that you described, as far as an amendment which would change the name of and institute the office oversight as board oversight as a standing committee, does not preclude the continued proceedings of this committee as being necessary.
Right, and I don't think board oversight should actually be the ones that are changing the bylaws. I think that the bylaws committee should continue. I think we said that in the beginning of the meeting. The question is, do we add it to the bylaws as a special committee? Maybe that's what we do. And no, just leave it as it is. We're gonna keep it going.
I would say the bylaws committee, as it's currently composed, in my view, was that this was a temporary thing.
Yeah.
To do like a review of the bylaws
Right,
and then make recommendations. We covered elections, now we're covering oversight. I forget what everybody's like projects were. If people are like satisfied that we have addressed all the things that we sought to address, I think that is.
oh, so then, because I thought
that
earlier,
this would
okay,
cease to exist.
gotcha.
And the board oversight committee would become the committee that periodically reviews the bylaws and enforces the bylaws.
Okay,
And my idea for like the process, so I have another document here that lays out what that process would be.
Can I ask a question
Please.
on that? So, I like the idea. If let's say this was the body, that this was the board office, you know what I mean, the committee. And something happens that questions the existing bylaws. Do we, as the body, make that decision to look at the bylaws, or does the chair have to give an instruction that he would like the bylaws looked at, let's say whatever section, and give the board office oversight the mandate?
My view is that the board oversight committee would be allowed to look at that without the chair having to decide whether something needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that was my reading too. So there's just a place where this can always kind of, it's in their wheelhouse
Irrespective
of
of
things.
whatever the chair
Yeah,
thinks or doesn't chair. If the committee thinks.
And then
that
if the,
it's
yeah,
gotta
the
be
thing, something
effective.
has to be done, then they can make that
Okay.
recommendation. I think that makes sense.
But in addition to that being sort of my understanding of what the board oversight committee does, in the bylaws, there was a section about amending the bylaws. And I've amended that, and this was the last change I made today. Before, it gave a couple categories for circumstances in which the bylaws could be amended. It was like, the chair can propose something unilaterally, and that came up a couple,
We need a placeholder, I'm sorry.
yeah.
For the statement of needs, right?
I've got two.
Placeholder. And the statement of needs.
Oh, okay, yeah, district name. I bet they'd be like, we got you on this. You're welcome.
The agency can accommodate within its existing budget.
Mhm. But so it allows the executive committee to kind of decide that change needs to be made, the chair can decide, the full board can decide, and then like a bylaws committee, if one exists at the time, can decide. And so I amended that to say that also the board oversight committee can propose a change to the bylaws. And the idea behind like the board oversight committee is a forum for which like people can be like, I didn't like that this happened. No, they would, that was a bad, I shouldn't use. Somebody can do that very seriously. And the board oversight committee would hear that and say, okay, you're right, this should be changed. Let's think about how to change that. And then can propose directly to the full board. And because the executive board just does like board business, what's going on in the community.
All right,
Thank you.
do you have anything else you want to present on, or?
No, but I do think the composition of the board oversight committee is of like supreme importance. And I love your idea that secretary and treasurer would be on board oversight and not necessarily executive. Yeah.
And how would you, aside from those members?
I hadn't thought about, so while Angel was speaking earlier, one thing that occurred to me was like, and this is not like a tested idea, this is a new idea. Like what if the district manager had a say in who the chair of the board oversight committee was? I don't know, like.
What about the board votes in the members?
No, okay, well, let's
No?
say like, not you necessarily, Angel.
Any,
Okay.
it's a precarious position for a staff person,
For you to do that.
for a staff person.
Right, so, I mean, and
I always do advise off the record in a non-official capacity. So I'll always say, oh, actually, I'm super busy, I don't know, that kind of shit, stuff. But like an official thing, I don't think that's a good.
okay, so then,
The vice chair of the board is not necessarily a good, I don't know what that would do as far as setting.
oh, you mean like the,
Yeah.
I mean, it would give the vice chair more power, which I think is a good thing, and gives it more responsibility. We've been talking, I think, about defining the vice chair role more at some point.
I mean, if everything is all good, it's all good. If there's some.
Or what about if the vice chair had their recommendations of members and then the board had to vote on them? That way no one can turn around and say, well, I have a problem with who's on that committee. I mean, I don't know, just throwing ideas out there.
Yeah. So in the spirit of throwing out ideas, an idea came to mind, we don't have to dwell on it. That this, I think all committees should be in place for the entire term. It should be announced at the beginning of the term, of the session, but especially this one. Well, the standing ones, like it's in place, right? Like if it's these 5 members have been appointed to this committee or on this committee, then they're on that committee for the whole session. There's none of this jumping up. Like if they need to leave, they need to leave. But like the removing or that kind of jazz, for like kind of silly reasons, I think it's important for that body to be there. And then the other, I think, small idea, not small, big idea. Some responsibilities are being considered to be removed from the executive committee. A kind of pet peeve of mine is that it isn't super clear on CB11 what it wants the executive committee to do. It gives it a couple of functions, but then it's kind of nebulous. So maybe, not tonight, but maybe this is an opportunity to, as we're discussing and putting in this board oversight committee, then perhaps, okay, what's left over for executive and what, isn't it doing? Because like what you proposed here is adding on to what office oversight is doing, which is pretty much focused on staff. Adding on things like, okay, so oversight of the membership itself in the body. I think that makes a ton of sense. But then what's left over for executive and what specifically is it supposed to do? And I don't know that it has to be 100 points, but maybe if right now it's just 2, maybe we can get that to
That's what I was.
5 that are very clear, and then, and
We
then,
could build on it, right?
at least these, but not limited to, something like that.
Yeah, I love everything you just said. My view on like what executive does is that it does like the business of the board and is the place where everybody on each committee like comes together and says like this is the work that we're doing on our committee. And I feel like that distinction can be pretty clear. Like the community work is exec. Like it's the difference between like the judiciary branch of the government, which is like, I know you didn't like the word adjudicate, but like the cabinet doesn't decide like what the rules, or
Yeah,
maybe
I
not
guess,
anymore,
I guess.
but back in the day,
Here all night, but
yeah, it's
I
like-
think I'm getting it.
it's like this is what we want to do, and then the board oversight committee just is honestly like a tool to help effectuate those things and to keep those ideas in check. Yeah.
Yeah, and then executives like, how are we interfacing with the community? How are we responding to the community?
Yeah, there's like almost no like public facing function of the board oversight committee. Whereas executive committee is like almost entirely like public facing.
Yeah, I was actually, Jessica first. I know you've been trying to talk.
Yeah, I think it's maybe, will seem a little bit off topic, but sort of rewinding to discussing the composition of the committee, and I think it is back on our agenda regarding committee assignments, and it's something that we've had on our agenda previously, but didn't really.
You mean this committee's assignments? Yeah.
Yeah, no, committee assignments.
Wait,
Assigning
what are-
members
No,
to-
that note here was for the internal.
Right, that's what I,
Within the committee,
yeah.
Oh,
not like assignments.
good, same words, meaning a different thing. We're also on the agenda back in July, and we didn't really talk about them in a substantive way, and this is coming up
What-
again as to who would be assigned to this committee, or how would it be comprised?
Well, I'm just trying to get it.
Very confused,
Well,
can be.
no, I mean, yes and no. The committee, as originally said, the ongoing committee discussion assignments was that,
Meaning, what are we all doing here?
well, right, and I think we did, me and Kenneth divided up and then said, come back to us with what you have from each section, and, that hasn't necessarily happened so much. Sage, you're demonstrating what that practice was supposed to be. And maybe it's our fault for not, and I'll take the responsibility in that I didn't follow up. But I think each member was given a clearly defined topic to cover and bring. Somebody was given attendance, somebody was given this, and they said, bring your points to the table, and that has not happened.
But that's not what I'm
Oh.
talking about.
Oh, okay, because you went to what it's been on the agenda. I think that was been
What-
what's been on
Who
the
gets
agenda.
put on the committee?
Yeah,
That's all the share.
Oh, well,
right now, that is a
Brian's-
unilateral
Yeah.
set of actions.
Right.
And there's some question then, if that stands, then
well, then it would be them assigning the members to this committee, essentially.
right.
Sage had the idea of committees, well, that would be committees voting on their chair, that's different. Yeah.
So, I think that it's my understanding, that's something that had come up, Russell. It is not what we're talking about now, though
No, but you can talk about it since you brought it up.
it's not what we're talking about now, but it is a sort of a part of the question of the board oversight committee. How, what is it comprised of, and how does that happen? In the same way that kind of all special committees, and all of our committees are also, and it is, the process for that is unilateral in its current form. So,
I will say this just about who would be put on this committee. Then it would fundamentally say something is wrong with community boards, including this one, if we couldn't just say that anybody on this board should be capable of serving on this committee, right? I mean, that is the assumption that we're making, that I don't know what those reasons would be. I don't think we've explicitly said them, but obviously what we are saying is that some members would not be suited to do this and others would, because if that weren't the case, then the chair could just appoint everybody. Like this issue, and I'm not saying there hasn't been the issue. I know we've said, should this board chair have as much power as they do? Not the current one, I just mean the title of it. But because then I guess what I would say is, right, if we're going to make a special appointment process for this committee, then I think that whatever that is, should we decide to change it, then should apply to all the committees, or we continue to leave it the way it is.
I disagree. I don't think that's necessary. I think it's with all due respect, I think it's fine to admit that some people have strengths for certain things, and some committees, especially one that like decides internal processes.
But we don't do that with, so then Health and Human Services, everybody that's on that committee,
But
is.
Health and Human
is-
Services does not decide the rules for.
Executive does, as they have. Has
And
anybody vetted out who those people are still all appointed by a chair?
and I think that is in some cases an issue. And I think the way to address that is, having a committee
So then
and
what would be the alternative? How would we, besides
this
Angel
is what I
saying,
want. I don't have a default answer to that. I don't know. I want your feedback on how we decide who's on this committee. I know I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's something I know you're about to speak. But
So,
I know we talked about like subject matter expertise or having like a
right,
parliamentarian.
I was just gonna suggest that if this committee can come up with what, right, and we have done a lot of composition. If you decide what you'd like for the board oversight committee to do, right? So for instance, if you want, someone who can assist the staff with relations with board members as well as with the higher ups, like the executive, then it's not going to, when you get regular members, to go through, let's say, their application and see who might have HR experience. If you're looking to, where the body needs to do a lot of mediation, then it may not be wrong to, as you get new appointees, to read the applications, because the applications come, and see who might have a legal background, right? If you need someone with attendance issues and crafting that policy, then definitely the secretary should be on there. If we're talking about how to grow the board and the finances, right? Like if you have, like, let's say we have the Friends of CB11 account, which we don't, but if we did, then that makes sense for the treasurer, right, to be on. And how can the treasurer add value? So what would be I think my question is, what would be the ideal size, if there's an ideal size of the committee? And what are the points that you outlined that we want to hit in terms of proficiency? And who on the board, because you also need people who are also, like the Dan says, commonsensical, right? That can argue, not argue a point, but that can bring other viewpoints so that we just don't get mired in a certain way. So if you have 80% of that committee with the subject matter expertise or how it comes about, and then you have the 20% of just us regular Joes, that could be a way to have a good balance, right? And then if treasurer and secretary are here in board oversight, is there no reason for them to also be on executive? Do they have value on executive? Maybe not the treasurer, unless there's a treasurer report for the full board.
the only thing secretary, people might find this offensive.
No.
The only thing I've seen, and Rosa, in my opinion, has been a great secretary, and she's also the Parks chair, right? So she has another reason to be at the table. But in her secretary capacity is to go over attendance. So if that's really what that secretary is doing, and then that's going to become the duty of board oversight, I don't think there's any need, because it would just be like a redundant
Right.
report. So that's just my opinion. I think, okay, you've done a lot of work, and I'm trying to respect that work and not, I don't like to let things linger, right? You kind of, but I understand at the same time that you put a lot of good stuff out there, but, and everyone correct me if I'm wrong, until we can decide how we want this committee to be, formed, and then, if there's a vacancy, how would that be replaced? I don't think we can move forward without that, because,
I think that's what this meeting is for.
well, but, right, so I've asked, are we going to be able to come up tonight with how we think that committee?
Well,
Should be
just,
formed.
what are some ideas?
I mean, I have the idea of, if you're interested in being on this committee, you submit your, I don't know, a resume, credentials on why you think you'd be a good fit for this committee. And then why not just, we submit resumes when we're running for officer roles, and then we vote on those people at full board. And if we think that it is as critical as that, then one can make the argument that the full board isn't going to make the best decision on these things. But it's just my opinion that candidates that want to be on it submit their resumes and they're voted on at the board. That's just one idea.
So does that take away the right of the chair to appoint?
We can make it specific to that committee only and allow the, for the time being, unless we've
But what
decided.
I'm saying is that I think that should potentially be something that is looked at generally.
Right, and I agree with you in the sense, and that's what makes this challenging, is I believe that like we shouldn't have a separate policy for one committee, but you have pointed out that this is a more unique circumstance, so then is it wrong to have it be two separate processes?
Yeah, and I think already the distinction between, like, you want this to be a standing committee.
Yes,
There's already a difference acknowledged in the bylaws between
Between the
some
two.
committees and other committees. And then you have exec, which is like a whole different category, which is not, there's no like section, I just think there is a section, but it's not like a committee in the committee section for what executive committee is. And I think, I forget if we adopted this, but I remember somebody had proposed like a 1 year service on the board requirement for land use committee.
yeah.
So there's already precedent for making some committees a little bit different in the process for who's on them than other committees, and different rules governing different committees. One thing that occurred to me just now, I think the idea is cool of having the vice president chair this, having and the vice president still being on the executive committee. And that could be like the one link between the board oversight committee and the executive committee. The treasurer and secretary not being on exec, just being on board oversight committee, and then we'll have to finesse like.
I mean, well, that's, I guess, the other question. How many people do we think this committee needs?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm getting to that. And then I think maybe the board chair should appoint a certain number of people to this committee, and that could be decided. My view is like 2 or 3 people.
I was gonna say, I feel like 5 might be fitting. 3
Total or
total. Because I think when a committee gets too big, especially like this, the things, because you're looking at a very driven community committee that's gonna be getting things done, right? Like, and then you have too many people, quorum's easier to hit when you have 5. You need that 5 so you can try to get majority votes. And then you're still not giving the board chair as much power on how that committee is made up, because they're only putting 2 people on, and then 3 people are automatically on based on how the board has voted for those people. So, I mean, that's just another idea supporting yours, Jesse.
Say one of the suggestions embedded in the documents, and I appreciate this pointing out this process outline that you sort of also brought, which gives us a little bit more time to work out the nuts and bolts as to what we're proposing and how that would be played out. But yes, that those who turn off would be offered the opportunity to engage as a public member in board oversight. But I'm not sure now, given a more robust understanding of the function of the proposed committee, that would necessarily make the most sense. But maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, so the theory behind, and I don't want us to get off track because I feel like we should have like pretty good momentum. And I'm less like attached to the idea of, I think that that's going to cause some problems if public members, as they're currently.
Yeah, they're put on by the chair.
Yeah, and public members all vote. And I think that's an issue if you're deciding like attendance. There's a reason in the bylaws right now, there's no public, or maybe it's in the charter, no public member shall be a member of the executive committee for the avoidance of doubt. And I think that's because, like, yeah, public members are appointed at the discretion of the chair, that is not necessarily, I don't think that's like in the charter.
Mhm.
I'm not sure. I have to look back at that.
Well, I also think that if this committee is going to be doing so much at every level of the board, public members are not really affected by the decisions that this committee is making. They're only really affected by the work done by that specific committee. So I don't think that they should have the right to have more of a say on how this board operates. I mean,
I don't think they should have more of a say, but my view on the public member thing was that for the purpose of this committee also doing like trainings and passing on institutional knowledge to on incoming board members and continuing board members, that it would be helpful to one have like people who have been on the board before like play a role in that, and also to give outgoing board members as like a nod to them the opportunity to remain like attached in some like formal way to what's going on with the board.
Angel?
Yeah, so I was just saying that you guys were talking before, that in terms of compensation, I don't know if we have to be necessarily that prescriptive, but it sounds like, people like my idea of those 2 officers and then possibly the vice chair, so that's 3 that are voted in. And then that's it. Like, we don't have to figure out tonight, but we have more stuff on the agenda.
Yeah.
But let's say for balance, 3 appointed by the chair, right? And then potentially people that are cycling off, just making something up, 2 seats, right? For people that are cycling off, that are like veteran members that can bring that. The other thing that I was thinking of as you all were speaking is maybe a way to get into like who gets appointed is kind of working backwards from roles that the committee needs. The committee needs, a plumber, needs an electrician, needs whatever, so that folks know like these positions are open, should you have experience or interest in these particular things. Just an idea.
Yeah, I think that's great. My one change would be 2 appointees, and that's, I know, too specific for right now, but 2 appointees by the chair of the board, and I like your idea of like 2, but I also don't want to create like a competition.
7. 7 is not that big,
No, so you can always put in the bylaws from 5 to 7 members.
depending. Just in case you don't have the positions,
The 3 of
what if there's
the
no lawyer on the
Yeah,
board?
I have a hesitation with being too exact with the bylaws.
Right,
We can always like create a,
flexibility.
an additional document that kind of fleshes out.
Okay, so then,
But that's just my own.
no, that's fair.
Because then you're kind of handcuffed if people change your mind, like, I want to do 9.
Now we gotta
Oh, it says
reconvene
so.
a bylaw committee and all that, and we don't wanna have to do
So
that.
no less than 3 members.
Or, yeah, something.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to reconvene the bylaw. It would be
No,
Yeah,
if
we
we
don't
put
want-
it in the bylaws, I'm saying, and then we decided to change our
Right,
minds,
so
we
you
would.
would say no less than 3 members. So
Right.
that will be the treasurer, the secretary, and the vice chair.
Right,
And then
already.
everybody else is in addition to.
Already every
Do we have
committee
a
can
committee
have that.
You can't.
okay,
No less than.
no less than.
No less.
All right, for the sake of, I could stay here all night, but then I get blamed because, I kept the meeting going too long. Sage, it's a lot, but I think everyone in this room, has a fundamentally good grasp on where this is going. As the chair, I don't feel this is your thing, so I'm gonna ask you though, what do you think next steps are? How do you wanna move this forward?
In this process document right here, I lay out sort of what I wanted to happen in September, and that was like this presentation and just drafting the materials, to get everybody's feedback on. In October, my plan is to present revised materials from this September meeting. Hopefully, good enough and like detailed enough for us to vote on whether to bring this to the full board. Also in October, presentation to the Office Oversight Committee, because I think it's important for them to approve of any changes to Office Oversight.
Well, right now, office oversight is very general, regarding like the board work and stuff. So even if you didn't do a presentation, it would be enough, I think, to present, let's say, the full board, and say, it could be enough that the proposed presentation can go out, and if you don't do a formal presentation to the office oversight committee, I think it would just be enough for them to know, because right now, the work hasn't started this year. So this would be us going into, not so much in a different direction, in a more targeted direction.
I think that's fine. I just thought it was like a nice terminology.
No, it won't be that. So what we'll do is we'll see when Officer Executive goes in October. And definitely should do the presentation there. But if for whatever reason you're tied up and couldn't, then that would be separate.
Yeah, I think that will not be tied up.
I think, so, all right, I think that's a great idea. I think in terms of the voting on the proposals, I'm certainly open to us doing that in October. If, and I assume what you've presented is very similar to what we've spoken about tonight. If the committee though, like, because you're gonna really be bringing, I guess, a more finalized thing, and, you know, there are a few things, like I think we've gotten to, so if, I would say the latest that I'd like to take a position on would be December, but possibly November. That's my thinking right now. Jessica?
Point of clarification, not to be answered immediately necessarily, but how much kind of detail is necessary? You know, do we need to figure everything out in order to move forward with the general idea? And I just want to put that out there because I think we don't. And we should figure out what that line is of what needs to be decided now and what can be, you know,
No, I think that.
further amended later.
Well, you make
a fairly good
That's a-
outline. The only thing that I would suggest that definitely needs that section is what we discussed about the district manager hiring. That has to be that.
And we have that item, yeah.
But this is, information will change in the work of a body and not necessarily like reinventing, you know, electricity.
There could be a few things, I think that, like the main points that you want in there, I think you bring up a good point in that, like, we have standing committees now that are clearly not that clearly defined, but they are allowed to exist. I think a lot of this possibly could go into like a guide kind of, like of what this committee does on the more broader topics. I think how it's made up, what its main tasks are, that's the important stuff. But again, like, this is your thing, so I do want you to come, but I agree with Jessica, right? Like, we don't want to create like 10 more pages in the bylaws to accommodate this.
Yes, I've already proposed changes to the bylaws that contemplate.
And they weren't overwhelming.
Yeah, it was just replacing
I
the word
agree.
in some places. And
I agree.
a little bit, like moving some stuff around. And I think, like, my goal is for next month to propose like more details in like the underlying governing documents, and then ideally like polished draft of how the bylaws would change. But in order for this committee and the full board to be informed as to what they are voting to support, because there's like underlying materials, like if you just decide like we're going to do the bylaw, like it's important to know what is it going to be the board oversight committee.
We could theoretically take 2 votes, right? Like, you could make the bylaw revision. I would suggest just present it like this, right?
I like this one.
And then we could present, like, you could craft a kind of responsibility and procedures, I'm just throwing a term out there, of this committee, present that to, I don't know if you'd even have to go, maybe for the time being, present that to executive, take a vote on the procedures, and then the full board, and so that if you want this to be, you know, technical, right, and very like.
I don't think executive needs to play because this is the bylaws.
Well, I mean, no, to enforce this. I mean, unless you just want to have a general procedure that the board hasn't officially adopted, I guess is what I'm saying. Because a lot of what you're talking about tonight is not going into the bylaws, right? So then do you just want it to be a general practice that can kind of change, or is it going to be something?
This is laid out in the process document. So process document says we're going to have the proposed revisions to the bylaws. That's like what
Right,
we
that-
have voted on and
yeah.
hopefully be final. Then we have a resolution to be considered by the Office Oversight Committee to be called the Board Oversight Committee. That includes a name change and lays out like the categories of things that would change.
Sorry, point of clarification? office oversight would adopt this new set of rules.
I was just gonna ask, is that, is the chair is the one that does the committees, except for the standing committees, right? And so, it doesn't necessarily have to follow that a board oversight, that office oversight has to, adopt this, because that, we don't convene ourselves, we didn't
Yeah.
form ourselves, the chair formed us.
He could also,
right?
this, he could
So
expand
this-
you.
Right, and you can disband us where at will, like, put everyone in New York. So we don't necessarily change, we do not vote on changing our process, because our process is dictated by the board,
Yeah,
right?
you don't need to vote, you just have
The process.
effective enough language in the bylaws, and then you can have an additional procedure.
Okay,
Respectfully, it's already in.
yeah, I know, all right, so,
This
well,
is
If,
great,
if the oversight committee involvement is complicates things unnecessarily, then
No, we
forget it.
don't need to be that, we need to know what the final expectations are, because it's almost like our outline to work. So once the board says this is fine, we like where this is going, and if it's voted on, then, and the chair keeps us together, then
we don't need to vote on the whole procedures, but we could add a line in the bylaws that, that the board oversight will be governed by the bylaws handbook, and then that's it. And we don't need to worry about what's in it, Sage, you could put what's in it. So I think you have your own clear directive on it, and so we'll revisit this next month, and either we'll take positions, but like I said, this committee will, I believe, take positions no later than December, possibly November, meaning that either by December or January, the board would have the opportunity to vote on all of this, all right?
Yeah, my goal is for this committee to vote on, pretty final versions of the bylaws revisions, and a detailed summation of like what this committee would look like, which is, the draft document that's already there. Then full board would have 28 days after that to look at it, think about it, and then full board would ideally approve it in November, so that we have enough time to like figure it out at the beginning of the year when there's like a new chair. And
November, full board?
right, so then the suggestion would be that if that's the case.
No, we'd have to take a position here first.
We will have to take a position here and then think about what November's gonna look like, so then the agenda has to be because you have elections. You know what I mean?
Or maybe a third, but also maybe December.
We could, I think,
No, you can fit in there, but I'm saying that the committee should plan now what they're gonna do, and the full board agenda should be thought about.
this can't go on full board, because we're not taking a position tonight. So this would have to go
Or executive,
to this committee to approve all these amendments,
right?
right? And then it would go to full board.
In
So-
October, we would vote on it. And then it would go to full
Right.
board.
You know what? I keep thinking it's October. That's where I'm
It's
messing
almost
up.
up there.
That's where I'm messing up.
That's a good mindset to be in for a statement.
All right, so then we could possibly take a position here in October. If we're worried though about the elections being a big meeting, then we run the option of you bringing these to us, we having like 30 days to technically review it,
There's not 28 days between
November.
October full board and November full board.
No, so what I'm gonna do though is, well, no, that's not how it would have to work. There would have to just be 28 days between this committee meeting, so they have the notification. So what I can do, and I think you make a good point, and then I'm gonna leave it at this. You make a good point. November is gonna be I think, a very busy meeting on top of whatever else we have to do. So I think what we'll do is we'll vote on this. You present it next month. We'll vote on it in November. I'll make sure to set this meeting that it's at least 28 days prior to the December full board meeting. November. No, now because November, we're saying we don't want to vote on this. It might be too busy.
I think tomorrow we should talk to Angel about
Just-
the November.
No, I'm dictating it.
Okay, no, I'm
Just
saying
do
about
your
what
part,
we're doing.
and then we'll figure out the voting later. It's just, he has a lot of work to do.
Okay.
Respectfully.
All right.
You're gonna be like, 27 and a half. Don't worry about that.
All right.
There's homework to do, and then we'll figure out the rest.
All right, let's get to clarifying whether excused absence count towards the removal from membership. All right, are we all familiar with what the excused what qualify as excused absences?
It's pretty vague, like, sometimes, yes, I'm familiar, but I think it should be changed in some way.
I agree with you. I mean, I think some aren't,
Oh, sorry.
military service and jury duty. What? Prove it? Jury duty? You could, you could bring your summons. I mean, yeah, look, I'm of the mind that excused absences are removed completely. That's just my sentiment, and they are absences. You know, when people come for their hearings, we don't ask them specifically, why was that excused? We just hear them say why they couldn't make meetings, right? So I'm of the mind that we just honestly get rid, I mean, just be, polite enough to let your committee chair or chair know that you won't make the meeting. That could certainly be taken into account at your hearing that you did that, but we don't need to count them anymore. There are still people who think that they had an excused absence and they were not marked absent. So, Jessica.
2 points. One, just earlier today, in trying to prioritize data point back qualifiers, using the differentiation, sorry, so many words, the differentiation between an absence and an excused absence was kind of something to consider. And then, so I've used the distinction between one or the other objectively, just, 4 hours ago, for a purpose that was helpful and kind of better understanding of the context. Whatever that qualifier means, we don't know. But my sort of point is, if we are in the process of kind of ensuring that there is a body to really consider these things intentionally, we need to do that now.
Well, I mean, I guess we don't have to really make a decision on this thing. I guess my only thing is that the excused absences are granted by the chair or the committee chairs, right? So then, are you gonna then evaluate the, what their idea of excused absence was once it comes to like a board oversight? I just think we get rid of them. I gotta stay with that idea. They're totally pointless.
My question to you is, should the only kind of absence be considered is if the chair has actually asked a board member to do something in relation to board work? And if that is so, then everything else, depending on what the body discusses, would just excuse whether you're here or not, it doesn't matter. But if Xavier asked me to go to wherever to represent while he was doing something, then that's not my fault that I was absent. I'm still doing board work.
So we count those as absences now? We don't. If you're doing work for,
Excused on board business.
but when we count attendance, does that count as an absence though? No, okay, so then, right,
That would be the
right, but we count other excused absences as absences. So I think, and maybe I'm stupid, this is actually not worded correctly as it is, because it's counting the board business stuff the same as the other ones, and the board business stuff is not an absence, and the other ones are excused. They're not the same thing. One does not count as an absence, the other ones do. They're just called excused. These should never have all been grouped together. That one should have actually been separated.
And I don't want to belabor of the point, but I'm gonna ask you, does the charter ever ask, and you would know, it doesn't specify what excuse absence, this is something
We don't even need, I searched the city charter, there isn't anything.
Yeah, I'm in favor of getting rid of the idea of excused absence in general and say, to reflect Nelson's suggestion that everybody's marked absent, subject to permission of the chair.
Or we could just make it like,
Not here.
Well,
No.
it should be the board chair has actually given an assignment.
right,
And has let that committee chair know this person's not gonna be there because they're not.
so we can take the whole excused absences out, take that whole phrase out, and then just put, because this is, and then just put something in for that one situation where we clearly state that that person will not have that absence count towards their attendance, or something of that nature. Angel?
Right, so you could do that, or, because I think the bigger problem is how absences play into potential removal.
Right.
That's where everything goes crazy, right? In terms of how these things are executed. And I would say that this future board oversight committee, they have this responsibility. If they're not going to take this part seriously, whatever, however they define seriously, then that would also be another place where we're wasting a lot of time. So just offering an alternative, not poo-pooing your idea. Either get rid of it, or even if you kept it, just indicate very clearly that excused absences, and this is assuming that they're being reported responsibly, are not going to count towards removal, right? And then putting some weight behind unexcused absences, potentially being, like resulting in removal, right? Or just delete the whole bloody thing and save me a lot of hair.
Yeah, that's what.
Because the charter does say that you may be removed, not that you have to be removed. But then and that's all fine, but then there's the reality of the meetings. The reality is that a whole bunch of people convene, a whole bunch of people give up their time, and when you don't have quorum, all that time is wasted, right? So there has to be something that recognizes that potential, right? And communicates to members that they have a responsibility to appear or to inform that they cannot appear for whatever the reason is. And you don't have to prove any proof. Like, if you tell me you're sick, I'm not asking you, right? Fine, right? So be it, get better. But in terms of like being here, right? Having a whole room full of people, a whole room full of presenters, and there's no quorum, there has to be something that recognizes that and respects people's time, because and you guys are sick and tired of hearing me talk about this at executive, right? There has to be something that acknowledges that has been a massive problem, just forever. And I don't know that you have to go into a long, in-depth thing in the bylaws, but something that's very clear, right? Bam, 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 you're either here, you're not here, and we're doing this or we're not doing that. And I would suggest that it be as cold as possible. If you want to put it into ChatGPT, you have 5 unexcused absences, goodbye. Or, I don't know what, because the charter does say substantial non-attendance. It's up to the board to define what substantial is, and it's up to the board to decide what it wants to do. But what we currently have and have had for a long time, inarguably, is incredibly confusing. So I beg you to clean it up. I don't know if 5 excuses get you slapped on the wrist and a finger wave or whatever the heck it has to be, but something, because, if I get asked one more time what an excused absence is.
Absences are subjective.
Right.
Like,
because the issue is that if you're not there, there's no quorum.
that's
Whether
it.
you're sick or you forgot to call or whatever the hell it is.
And if we don't.
And if you have 10 meetings in a session, right, and you missed 5 of them,
That's it.
and all of them are unexcused, hold on a second. You might have forgotten, you might have gotten the wrong date. These are all regular things, but that's 2. What about the other 3? Oh, I was sick, and I'm like, okay, did you ever get better? Can you send them out, you know what, I was super sick, here's my thing, or whatever. Some kind of communication. What I'm saying is there's never any communication, and there's often them's my buddy, he's excused. And that results in, I could care less about the dishonesty. It has a consequence, which is the potential for no quorum and people's time wasted.
I just think that if I'm out of work and I'm sick, if I have a sick day, I get paid. But if I'm still out.
Yes.
You see what I mean? And so while there are reasons why people can be out, if this is a board doing board business, then it seems to me that the most important thing is that if the chair gives you an assignment on your day, then that, right, we keep it back. But
So
everything
I'm gonna argue
else,
back, Nilsa, because there's still the possibility that the chair is corrupted, right? The chair's gonna do a favor for their friend. Oh, I sent a dem to
no,
go.
but then the
But let me
difference,
finish.
I agree.
A dem's gonna say, I'm gonna send a dem to go to the, whatever it is, and that,
A ribbon
usually
cutting.
it's after the fact. Usually, oh, no, I sent it to them on board business. What board business?
But that was.
Hold
that's the
on,
whole
how
thing.
is the board benefiting from that
Exactly.
business? Is
That's
the
the
board,
next step.
did them ever come back and say, you
And
know
you
what?
report
At last
this,
month,
that's
you know, I
How about
did
the
this.
chair just doesn't assign board business on the night of a
I'm-
full board meeting?
I'm saying it
That makes
can't be
sense.
done, and
That makes
I don't even have an issue with that. I have an issue with its execution, right? It's enforcement. I'm like, if a dem's been sent, okay, fine, just communicate so I know, so I'm not to look for them, or I know it correctly. And then the next month, it isn't just a dem's getting, you know, like a break, because the chair is like buddies with them, and then, you know, whatever, but that a dem actually is responsible. The following month, I attended a conference on behalf of the board, and we learned
Like
the
a
following.
report, yeah.
There's the paperwork, or just send me the PDF, something that is
Or like a
showing that
screenshot
some
of your
kind of
stuff.
respect to everybody, because, like, I have seen, I'm sorry, Sage, I'll be done in 10 seconds. I've seen 2 on board business, and I've been here a long time. 2. I never heard a report. Usually it's like, oh yeah, but Susie sits on the blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay.
Sage?
Yeah, I think, like maybe I'm in favor of just getting rid of excused absences in general, and I think it should be the chair's responsibility. Like if somebody has a committee meeting, don't send somebody else to the.
Right.
And like right now, there are like you are allowed to have 3 absences before it becomes a situation. So I think like not allowed, but
Right, but like if you're
like,
only
if
getting
you have to
one,
miss a couple, that's fine. Like I think when you've missed 4, that is then you should have to present to either the board oversight committee or the oath. I have to look more into what exactly how that process works. But I'm fine just being cold.
I'm all for that on this.
Yeah, and if you have like reasons you were absent, then present those in the due process.
Well, I guess that's my next question before, and I'm gonna take Nye's hand and public or board member. Angel, is this due process that's, I think, been, what's really been giving us the hard time? Is that something we have to give? Like,
Yes.
if we do?
Yes.
Even though the,
Yes.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
So then we're still gonna have to have hearings and all this stuff? There's no way we could get around that, right?
So like the members are, have the right to due process. I think that's totally fair. The issue isn't our process. The issue is how we do it. That's like, what we have written down is not our problem. Our problem is how we do it. Like, we had the hearing the other day, and I knew before the committee even voted, nothing's gonna happen. Now, that then, again, time check 8:30, that then says, well, then why are we doing this? If we already know ahead of time, right? Like if I'm going to ask my kid to do something, it can't just be because I said so. It has to be for a reason. Hey, Junior, I need you to do this for this reason. And then I have to enforce because I want to complete the task, because I also want to understand how to follow directions and complete something, right? But if we have rules that are clear, right? I think they're quite clear. It's how we're enforcing or how we're defining our enforcement of that. And whether that's we're gonna be harder or easier, whatever it is, I'm begging consistent. Because if I have to attend one more of these things, I think my head's gonna explode. And I won't speak for you, but members of the committee have expressed similar frustration. And I think it's because it's such a hard target to get to because of the way that it's been enforced. You're either gonna do it or you're not gonna do it, but why go through the motions and frustrate a whole table for pantomime?
Then I'll go to Nye. Our board chair, and I think some of us maybe have heard about it, I've talked about it. I've mentioned like the third party potential for the hearings as opposed to this board. I think the biggest challenge that this board has in doing it ourselves is, we don't appoint each other, we develop relationships, this and that. It's hard to be impartial. Let's say you voted to remove somebody and then everybody else voted to keep them on. gotta kind of live with that person you voted on. I mean, people hold grudges, whatever. We can't control it or not. We could think about totally moving that process there. Now, my pushback in my own head on that, without getting into any details, this is just my personal feelings. This last executive meeting, I didn't feel that every situation was exactly the same. There were some that I would have felt like I wouldn't want to have referred to a third party. I felt like the board could have made a sufficient decision there. Felt there were other cases that go to a third party. We clearly are not able to do this anymore. So what I was thinking, and this could be something we digest, I don't think the executive committee moving forward that much should have this. It's a total waste of time for that committee. There's been the talk of like, with the community members I've heard, about like why this board doesn't have general goals for the year. And I feel like a lot of the committees, let's just use supportive housing example, I don't want to go too far off topic, that touches a lot of committees, and they don't cross-collaborate as much as we'd like to say that they do. And perhaps the executive committee where they all gather could be that moving forward point of these overarching goals. And one way to free them up to do that would be to move this process, which then is where I think board oversight could be that filter. Board oversight could decide what hearings they would like to refer to a third party and what hearings they like to keep at the board, although that could be an issue too, but that's just an idea. So they'll say and then deny, but I'm gonna need Angel. Yeah, let me see if I.
Just because she's had
can go old school.
No, we were having trouble with the audio. Can you hear us now? I'm trying again from the laptop.
Yes, I can hear.
Nye, can you hear me? Yes? You have the floor. You can go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, we can't.
I had put a note in the chat. I'm not sure that my questions are relevant because they were from the previous conversation about board oversight. And I know that was like
We
an hour.
don't hear you yet. I don't want to.
Go ahead. Try one more time.
I said my questions were from the 7 p.m. mark and it's now 8:51. It was about the board oversight committee. So I wasn't sure that they were still relevant since the committee has moved on.
Nye, can you?
Other topics.
We haven't heard you, so I want to stop you till we can, and then I'm going to need you to start from the beginning.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Nye. Try one more time.
I'll just log off.
No, we got you.
We got you. Go ahead.
What I said was, thank you for moving me up to a panelist, but I joined at 6:30 and my questions were from the 7:13 mark of the conversation about the board oversight committee. I had 5 questions and I just wasn't sure, as I put in the chat, whether or not it was still relevant to ask them because the committee has already moved on to new topics.
Well, they're still relevant because we haven't taken a position on it. And I'm sorry that I didn't see your hand.
First, it was a question about the board oversight committee, some of which was discussed, but point of clarification, the executive committee does have some fiduciary responsibilities to the board. And so I know that there was a lot of conversation about the role possibly that the treasurer could play, but I would just implore the committee, this committee, bylaws committee, to consider ensuring that the treasurer was on both the executive committee and the oversight committee so that there was a transfer of knowledge regarding our fiduciary responsibilities, especially as it relates to hiring or any other budgetary or operational expenses. Secondly, because it was called the Oversight Committee, I didn't hear any conversations about succession planning. As Angel mentioned, he's been here for a very long time. We also are expecting a turnover in the board next year. So I wanted to suggest or recommend to this committee that a review of our succession plans should be part of the jurisdiction of this oversight committee, as well as a review of any of our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, so that we are planning in advance for the knowledge transfer that will happen next year with the board term limits. It's kind of our first big turnover. And also as we plan for, potential hirings and changes in staffing in the future. I'm just going to scroll right through them, so please forgive me if I'm being speaking too fast. I also just wanted to comment on the earlier conversation regarding how we conduct our meetings and some of the decorum that should be taking place with everything that's going on in the world right now. I just want to recommend that the committee and the board be mindful about our good intentions, just so that it is not misinterpreted that we are trying to silence voices at our meetings, because some of the conversations seem like it could be misconstrued. And I know in the past we've had issues as a board with people thinking that we were trying to suppress comments or viewpoints, or also because of differences in egos and styles and personalities. And so we want to be mindful at this particular point in time in our nation about anything that we say or do that may come across as that. Then I just wanted to say, last but not least, really liked the training component, but I do think that each member of the executive committee who may have to hold any meetings in the absence of any of our leadership all go through a training. There was a lot of back and forth at the last meeting about whether or not all board members were allowed to comment in the public comment. And those are those kind of moments where we see that there may be some gaps in what our board members' understanding are, whether you're a public member, whether you're an appointed member, and also our executive committee. And so if the oversight committee could be tasked with doing some special training for the board members so that each category of board member understands their role. So public board member, appointed board member, and then executive committee, so that we all have more consistent meetings and a better experience for everyone who's in the room. Those are really just the summaries. I had more questions, but last but not least, sorry, just one last thing. I just wanted to commend is it Sage? Was that Sage that was speaking earlier about the changes? I just wanted to say that we seem to start from scratch every time we go through some of these revisions. And I just really Googled quickly and found really great statements from some of the other community boards regarding some of the things that we've talked about in their bylaws. And so I just wanted to encourage us to be always mindful of the fact that we have resources across the borough in the other community boards who are dealing with these same challenges, and being able to repurpose some of their work and great statements would ease some of our work. And that was it. Not sure if you guys heard all of that.
No, we did. Thank you. All right. With that said, now we're going to part D, continue discussion, proposed revision to election procedure, but this is going to be just very specific to one thing. Jessica, I believe I will hand the floor to you now.
Thank you. Are we about, we're heard and we're on the record now without problem?
Yes.
It sounded like Niall said she was receiving audio. We just didn't know if she was.
We weren't seeing her because we were sharing the screen, and then we had a subsequent audio. I don't know, the owl seems to be not.
Maybe when I was told the hand, I recognized it, but I was allowing everyone in the room to have their hand up to speak. It was recognized. So I think it was an oversight. Not what everyone else said, but again.
I wish that people would understand that sometimes things kind of happen, it's not purposeful.
Yeah, I think I do my best to allow everybody to be heard, and if it does happen, know that it's not intentional, and I will try to do that. All right, Jessica, now, floor is yours.
Thank you. I believe I am sharing my screen. Are you able to see that? Okay, so what I am bringing before the committee tonight is a timely matter related to a couple of points in our bylaws that govern the timeline of our elections process. Full disclosure, to avoid any potential conflict of interest within board responsibilities, I am on the elections committee. I don't know if that matters, but I just want to disclose it matters. But a couple of things. One, I believe this is section Article 2, section A2A, that states that the presiding officer of the elections committee shall be selected by the chairperson, and such elections chair shall be a member of the, I should say, executive. So that's just error. Yeah, that's a typo. So I would recommend, and per definition in Article 4A1, it indicates that all this is a typo. So in section B, B1 indicates that what's highlighted in blue, cyan, or digital, the nomination period shall conclude at the regularly scheduled monthly October board meeting in the biennial election year. Wherein we are moving quickly towards a full board meeting. That would then indicate the end of the nomination period. I have suggested, and having served some members of this, we were not looking, because I think their opinion is important. Where we changed the bylaws to shorten the notification period, should we, this committee, decide that making an adjustment to this nomination period is warranted, we do have enough time to issue notice to board members and take a vote at the board in October, which would go into effect immediately, thereby enabling the extension of the nomination period. Which, having served on the elections committee in the past, I have always seen that period feels a little bit too short in that, in this instance, we did not have a sort of a proper announcement in September. So I think where we conduct a lot more business digitally and we respond, timescales have shifted perhaps since this was instituted. And I don't think that extending the nomination period is in any way prohibitive from the board and all of its members, including nominating candidates, from engaging in candidate forums and or other activities while the nomination period remains open longer than the close of the October board meeting. So what I'm suggesting as an amendment, apologies, is to amend this to allow the nomination period to conclude, keeping the language of that the elections committee shall establish a period of at least 2 weeks during which members may nominate oneself or another member for an officer position, allowing that minimum limitation to also allow the nomination period to conclude no later than 1 full week before the scheduled election. So and realizing now that then that could sort of push things much closer to the election if there's not another qualifier on the least 2 weeks. The other couple of points. So a longer or open nomination period, I think would, as I'm going to stop here for a minute, would support opportunities for engagement and would not adversely affect the elections process. No, so well. No, because.
Oh, yeah, but you were going first, so, yeah, thank you.
So I just have a couple of questions. We have not, in the timeline that has been, we never had a problem with the elections, right? I think that people who want to run already have a idea that they want. And I know that I had to write a lengthy email about election during the summertime, not this summertime. These people will already indicated to the department that they went and marshalling up that support. So my question is, so you have 2 weeks prior to the meeting, right? Right? But and then you're almost getting it just up to 1 week before the full board. But for people who jumped in and right from the beginning, that have already started, because you're going to dictate people giving out their resumes, writing their statements, moving put together candidate night, whatever the elections committee. So if people are still on the fence, they may be disadvantaged if there are activities that happen prior. You know what I mean? So I can understand if you want to extend. Like, you know, I always think that it's just funny to end the day of the meeting, like, you have to have it in. And I could see if you want to extend it to the end of the week. But then you would have, you know, and you didn't really more. But in terms of the work of the elections committee, having to navigate potentially a candidate jumping in like the week before, I'd be, you know, I think I have that already worked out.
Well, just because I had thought through it a little bit, and I really appreciate the process. Early nominations are advantage, without a doubt. That being said, the turnaround time for documentation, both to vet the candidate, right? And then to disseminate to the board our docket, I think that's
those running. I'm more comfortable with the compressed. And I do think that there is a focus on a fresh understanding of who's running for what at the board. However, that jump into the race late strategy, right? That is what is taken advantage of by extending the nomination period. It's not preclude someone who has built a track record of opportunity to participate in the process from the day the nominations are open. So I think a longer open period allows for the actual board meeting to be less of a deadline and more of an opportunity. But I'm questioning for to be still,
Right, that's what I'm questioning.
it's just longer than that.
Right, like longer than that, so how long for me, based on my experience, which may not have been little. We were then getting the mechanics of trying to do things and getting out places and sending out emails, believing how the elections was gonna be. And so for us, even though it was actually it worked, right? And like I said, I could see this thing. I just, the week before the board, when a lot of things are going on, was a candidate may want to jump in. You know, I just think that people really should know. You know, they'll have basically the whole month of October. So if you want to do it to, let's say, the end of October.
But right now we can't because of the.
No, I know. But I'm just saying, you know, one thing is to that time when because I know how busy elections are.
That's sorry.
And then I'll go to Sid. Yeah.
And extending the nomination period does not preclude any of these activities from happening concurrently. As you know, as they're ongoing, there's a requirement for a published list of those vetted candidates, and the activities that are mandated will be scheduled possibly even before the nomination period is over. So it only serves to benefit those who are not respond in a timely way. However, it provides the elections committee opportunity to engage members around this process and extending the open period of nominations, which is from a public perspective as well as far as how.
So I don't think we need to change the nomination period. I think the only thing that needs to change in the bylaws is when the nomination period begins. And not really only for this reason of us having not abided by the bylaws this year, because somebody did not, really compensate, somebody not, the chair not being here or people not doing elections. I think the bylaws as is, at least, I have other views on like the election should come at different times of year. But I think the process is pretty good. I think one thing we have not discussed, and so I don't think it's necessary to move to the end of the nomination period. I think the only thing we have not discussed is, or one thing we haven't discussed, is the fact that like it is kind of cool that somebody can nominate themselves, but as the bylaws are contemplated, ideally somebody else would nominate. I mean, there are some people who now claim that they can nominate for a position until the last day of the nomination period. Because the election committee notifies the nominees, and the nominee has to accept their nomination if somebody else is nominated.
Like you could inform, well, in this case it would be you, right? I could inform you I'm nominating Sage, and if I don't tell Sage I'm doing it, the only time Sage will find out is when you announce it. As opposed to right? Is
No,
that,
there's
there's a mechanism?
yes, there's a mechanism that requires a timely vetting process and a response by candidate of materials in the time.
Right, so the way it's been done in the past is where, well, I did special elections. You've been nominated before, and I say,
Yeah.
they're accept.
Right.
That you, or there's a nominations form that is sent to all the community members.
Right.
And they can nominate, and that's supposed to go to elections. And then elections is supposed to let the candidate know you have been nominated.
As soon as they receive it.
As soon as they receive it, they review it, and they are supposed to contact this house of facts. And then it says, they say, you have been nominated by them to your chair of the board, and you accept the nomination. And then you accepted that, you send back. And then you notice that you have accepted back at this. That happens, that's how they make the announcement.
Whereby the candidate is required to submit, then
Right.
set
Exactly, and once you know, and once you make the announcement in October, that's when you start telling them, well, hey, these are the candidates, these are the ones that are accepted, and these are the things that you will be contacted by the committee, and you will say this, and this, and this, and this, and that, so we will accept.
So the only change I would make to the bylaws currently, and I think this is timely because we're having to would be, instead of saying that the nomination period begins at the September full board meeting, to say that the nomination period begins 1 month before the October full board meeting. X amount of time before that.
Well, that couldn't go into effect because we wouldn't be able to ratify it in time. Right, so we can't change the period before elections this time because it's gonna happen at the October meeting. And
We can, if we make a change to extend the nomination period.
on the back end,
So that it does, yes, on the back end.
right,
so
not
it
on the
says-
front end.
Correct, and even if we did institute a different starting date, or say, instead of, so right now, the elections committee has to exist for 2 weeks. Doesn't say when that 2 weeks start, it says it has to exist for 2 weeks, and it ends at the October board. Ideally, it would start in 1, 2, it would start between 2 and 3 weeks before the October board meeting. And I, you know, to extend 1 week after, it depends on when the full board meeting is. This year happens to be early, which puts us at disadvantage.
Sage, you're talking about the
I
front.
was mistaken, but yes.
Right, and that we don't have time this election because anything we do now would have to be ratified. But the after the back end, we could take a position tonight. I'm just gonna, Jewel.
May
No, I don't know. Oh, I just wanna, I'm not against what you're saying. I actually believe it could increase participation and I don't think there's any harm in it. My only thing is, I think there could, even though someone throws their name in late, they could always turn around and say, oh, you know what, though, you had this candidate and I didn't get to do it. So I think for the sake of avoiding any of that, is there like a 2 week or the end of the month where we can extend it, but then none of the activities have taken place yet? Because I do think that all the nominees that accept their nomination should be able to partake in the entire process of that. And then, all right, so I'm gonna go Jessica, Sage, and then I'm gonna, if you wanna, it's your thing, if you wanna I'm gonna let you put the motion on the floor however you want, and we'll take a vote if you wanna do that, okay? So go ahead and then Sage.
So to clarify, every candidate that has been nominated, accepted the nomination, been vetted, and is established as a candidate, gets to participate in addressing the board at the election in November.
Okay.
But for a set period of time determined by the elections committee. So that will happen no matter what.
Okay. I guess and they're not wildly important, but the questionnaire and the resume, right? If you were to say set it nominations a week in advance, then when would you require those candidates to submit those documents, adequate time for board members to review it in advance of the meeting?
These are the additional, so, such documentation may include these credentials, and such documentation must be received, and we would leave a start qualifier and put an end qualifier on. So such documentation must be received no later than 1 week, following the acceptance of the nomination, and at least 4 days prior to the scheduled election. That would mean that the dissemination of said material, right now it is set at the elections committee shall assemble and provide such documentation to the members no later than 2 weeks prior to the election. I'm suggesting to shift that to 3 days. It changes it puts the ownership of urgency on the candidates that are serious.
The problem with that is that this board traditionally does not read a lot of the materials it has. This board traditionally does not work well when things are given till the end. And so the question will come up, I think what will happen is, what could happen is that board members will ask, one, why the change? When it's worked well, without a fully fleshed, like in between, right? And then the question becomes, on behalf of the candidate, right? Let's say I'm a candidate. I want to know who I am campaigning against, right? Or how I show my strengths and my weaknesses. So if I have a lot of weaknesses and I know who's up there, right? At a timely fashion, everyone should know who
They're running again.
is the person that they're running against. When you wait too late and then you have someone jump in, you don't even have that in our general elections. At our general elections, you have to get, signatures, and you have to get your name on the ballot, and then if it passes too much, you can't even get your name off the ballot. So while I can understand, extending a day or 2 days, or depending on the campaigning can be stressed if there's too much variable, especially in a transition year, right? Because this is the year that the chair that may have been able to go to a third term because of a change in bylaws is now at the 2, and going forward, whoever runs will be no max than 4, right? And so I always applaud change. What I'm questioning is, based on the fact that this is a new committee, right? Like a lot of new committee, so new ideas should be injected. But the timing and the extension could potentially make it harder for even that person who thinks they have a great opportunity to jump in. Because when are you going to do your candidates night? If you do a candidates night, are you going to do it 1 day before the election?
Not at all, that's what I'm saying.
But you see, so if everyone has to participate in all the events, right? Or if everyone should, because if we're electing a chair and all these positions, then everyone should be mandated to participate. Now, if I get sick and I can't do candidates night, but I've been in there from the beginning, then that's on me. But if there's too much variable, then how do I justify that some candidates might be shown at a better advantage, and just because I jumped in late, I can't do candidates night? Then my question to you is, then should all the events be within that last 2 or 3 days that you have, so that the board sees everyone at the same way? What I'm trying to say is, with the extension of the timing, then what you don't want the board is to say, well, why is this so long when I want to go away in November, people traditionally go away.
Well, they're gonna vote on this, so it'll be up to this board if they want that.
Exactly.
How about this? Because I want to get us out of here. All right, Sage, and then I'm gonna see if I can.
Well, I think, so what I was mistaken about earlier was when they have to announce the beginning of the nomination period. And that's because the elections committee, the first thing in the bylaw that says the chairperson shall establish the election committee no later than the regular scheduled monthly September board meeting. Yes. And so my theory is that the way this is supposed to work is before the September board meeting, the elections committee, the chair decides who's on the elections committee, and that's all done. At the September board meeting, the election committee stands up and says, it's us, everybody. Nomination period begins now. Let us know before the next full board meeting. At the next full board meeting, the elections committee announces to everybody, because not everybody's reading all their emails and, is aware of all that, very publicly on camera. This is who the candidates are for each position based off of who has accepted their nominations, who's been nominated, and if anybody wants to throw a nomination in.
3 days after the October, board meeting, I think it feels, sorry.
No, I
way
know
out
where
of
you're
order.
going. No, it's okay.
I was curious.
It feels like a blitz in October when we're like, this is the meeting, you gotta dial it in now.
Well, I think-
show up
But
as a
you
candidate.
already said that at
But we
September.
didn't.
Well,
Well, that's the problem that happened this year, but that's not something,
Having-
that's,
Having
yeah.
served on elections before in recent history, it still felt like a blitz.
okay, so I hear everybody's points.
and the
Sage,
board oversight committee was check the chair.
Sage, a lot of what you're saying is 100% correct in that we do have maybe a bigger issue this year because the process wasn't followed the way it was supposed to be. And theoretically, if the process was just followed the way it's supposed to be, it wouldn't be such a big problem. At the same time, I am of the mind that it's too close as was originally proposed, but I don't think that there can't be any extension past that meeting.
By our bylaws, there cannot be.
Right, no. I mean, and now this is where I'm gonna try to end this meeting. Would you like to make a motion, and then just say it all, and I'll have Angel, if we pass it, put it up in bylaw form, and then we'll take a vote. You make the motion you wanna make, and then we'll see if there's a second.
Just to sort of take the temperature here, suggesting, what I heard was suggesting to extend the nomination period and to close, not no later than 1 full week before the scheduled election date seems too close. No later than 2 weeks before the scheduled election date, with the understanding that nothing written precludes all of that good election activity.
But that's what you dictate. So that's the point I'm trying to get to.
What about the Sunday after the
What
full board
elections
meeting in
committee
October?
decides
By
of
then.
all the good things that are gonna be happening, you all, right, so the committee gets assigned in September. Those 2 weeks in September, traditionally, the committee's supposed to meet. Then, starting like the first week in October, last week in September, you start doing that nominations period, right, in October. Then you announce. So there's nothing to say to extend it. What I'm saying is I think that you have to know what are those good things that you want to do.
We've got dates,
So
don't
that-
worry, yeah,
right,
it's,
so that
we're working on it.
Right, because what you don't want is a process where it just seems like, people didn't get the full information.
It's
or that people
concurrent.
didn't.
Right?
All right, you know what? I'm just because,
We're gonna call, it's not- well, so.
I think the temperature is, I'm gonna just give you my opinion. The October meeting is on Tuesday, right? What about that Sunday after the full board meeting in, October? Because honestly, if you don't know if you're gonna run that week after we just had this whole meeting, then I'm sorry. If you wake up in November and decide to run, too bad. Try again next time.
So in the spirit of making an adjustment to the bylaws, I would suggest that and this is something that can be put into a motion, and I do understand that it's 9:25.
Yep.
The elections committee, right now it says, just gonna read 2 sentences, the elections committee shall establish a period of at least 2 weeks during which the members may nominate and the nomination period shall conclude regularly at the scheduled monthly October board meeting. I would like to bracket that the period begin at least 2 weeks prior to the October board meeting and extend 1 week after.
Okay,
Is that an
I think-
okay cushion?
I wouldn't say no to that. I think we need to separate what we need to do to solve the problem of this year
yeah,
versus like going forward.
before, yeah,
No, going
Oh.
forward, I think not really an issue because the way it's supposed to happen is like the bones are in place.
right,
But
you
we
just
have a
close them
problem
up,
this
yeah.
year. And so I don't think it makes sense to amend the bylaws and complicate it with like the 2 weeks before.
No, I agree
1
with
week
you on
after.
that, yeah.
But I do think we need to figure out a way to address it this year. But
Well,
I
with the
don't, I
1 week-
wouldn't make it a whole bylaws.
Well, with the 1 week after, not,
I just want to ask a question so that then you can answer how you want. What is the problem? We have.
there is no
No,
problem.
but this is what I want, this is what I'm getting at as a board member, right? Not even as an election chair for multiple times. If you have a process and you know what you're gonna do, and if you have that, we haven't gotten to the first week in October. We haven't vetted, we haven't done anything. So I'm wondering, what is the anticipated issue that we have to extend the session now in a transition year? I can see going forward, fixing the language, extending this and that, but I'm wondering, what has been seen that there seems to be an issue with thinking that you can carry out the elections or that people won't jump in 2 weeks and that people won't be nominated? Because I think that's what the question will be for anyone, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know what your preference is, but this is not,
Experience.
right, but these elections have been done forever. And people have the ability to nominate themselves. They've been nominated, they've been able, elections committees have been able to do activities where everyone comes in and elections have happened. So this is not an answer now, and I'm not voting on this, but I'm just wondering, what is the anticipated issue that we have, because I don't see it.
I don't think, this is my take on it, and then I would like you to just make your motion. I think, I'm not against the 1 week after the full board, if you want to make it. I will just say, I think that the main reason to begin was that she wanted to get increased participation in the elections, and I think that may be based off of the fact that the most recent previous elections have been unopposed. So there was just maybe an idea of how to increase participation because we've had these unopposed elections. That was my understanding.
Well, this is important. So I would say the reason I thought we had a real problem, besides the fact that like the elections committee was not convened before the September meeting, was because I thought it was a requirement that had to happen at full board meeting, the beginning of the nomination period. Yeah, so Jessica corrected me and was good about it. So now I think there is no problem, and I would, if I was on the elections committee, send an email out right now saying nomination period begins today. That way, because I think it's important that at the October full board meeting, people, are told who the nominees are, and that is the cutoff. Like, if you don't raise your hand at that meeting,
Yeah.
like.
And we're all aware of the same process, right? I mean, this isn't different from everybody. We've all been subjected to it. But, and I don't want to hear anything else. With that said, would you like to make a motion?
I'm going to say, this is the second time I've served on the elections committee, having been a member of the board for a much shorter period of time than you know, so, but having experienced that, and now being charged with, given a late start, and.
But you haven't been given a late start.
Yeah, but, okay, we've had this, I mean,
And
you've said all this.
with this opportunity, right, it feels compressed as a timeline. It does now, and it does the last time I was very much a part of enacting the process.
I'm not disagreeing with you. Do you want to make a motion?
I also don't want to confuse the board when the focus at the October meeting should be perhaps different. If this is not clear and it's not kind of unilaterally understood as a good thing, then it is, to Angel's point, keep it simple and make sure it's crystal clear, then it is maybe not to the benefit of, I can make anything go in whatever time period I have to work with. All I'm saying is that I think there would be a benefit to having a more workable time period than how it's written currently.
Okay, so I
Would I
guess,
like to make a motion? You can ask
but you're gonna
again.
refrain. All right, so we can revisit this after this election if we want to see some changes moving forward. So I guess you're passing on the motion for tonight. We'll leave it as it is. Okay, yes? Yes? Or you can make a motion, but one or the other now.
I think it would be a good thing, and I think that we are capable of doing it, and I think we changed the bylaws in a way that will allow us to do that.
I'll tell
However,
you what.
given full
Okay.
board and the what it takes to get consensus amongst that body, I respectfully think that it maybe is not the best thing to do.
Okay, fair enough. We're gonna go old business? No? New business?
Well, I would just say, I admire your ideas there, and I would think it would be great if the process was longer, but I also believe that, maybe now is not the right time to address it, and that we should discuss it.
It's the perfect time technically, but I think you're right, thank you.
New business? Okay, Angel, if you can take the roll.
Dan Brihon,
Present.
Will Jones, Sid Mason,
Present.
Christopher Morris,
Yeah.
Jose Altamirano, Valerie Ponte, and Ashley Rodriguez are absent.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned at 9:30.
I like this.
Oh, thank you. I was worried like going solo on this.